Good afternoon, everybody. I am Gil Cedillo, Chair of the Committee on Immigrant Affairs, Civil Rights, and Equity. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. I welcome you. I look forward to what's going to be a long, thorough, robust conversation. I want to thank Mr. Rue for being here with us, and Senator Price, thank you for joining us. We await the Council President, who is en route. And we also await our dear colleague, Nuri Martinez, who is dealing with issues related to the fires in the valley and surrounding areas. So they will join us when they can, but I want us to proceed first with general public comment, and then we will move to multiple item comment, and then finish with single item comment. So, if we may, general public comment, 1 minute. Mr. Kaufman, are you with us? From the ACLU, please come up. You had quite a spectacular dinner on Sunday. The whole world saw you. And please join us also, Blanca Hirado. Blanca, are you here? Thank you. So, is that Kaufman?
It is.
It is? Yes. Congratulations on your dinner on Sunday.
Thank you very much, and for the kind words. Councilmember Cedillo and other members of the committee, I'd just like to speak generally on the topics that are before the committee this afternoon. The federal government under the Trump administration has made clear that they intend to co-opt local jurisdictions, including local police officers, in engaging and supporting their deportation dragnet. This is a time for choosing. It's a time for choosing for Los Angeles, who has for a long period has been a leader in ensuring that its local law enforcement officers do not act as de facto immigration agents. This time and the challenges we face under the Trump administration call for clear, decisive leadership and strong policies to ensure that our city personnel and our agencies are not engaging in practices that support the Trump administration and its xenophobic policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. The city of Los Angeles has a rich tradition of embracing and welcoming individuals from diverse backgrounds, including a large population of immigrants. In recognition of the contribution immigrants make to the very fabric of our city, I urge you to foster a relationship of trust, respect, and open communication between city officials and city residents, regardless of immigration status. Please look at the City of Santa Ana's Sanctuary Ordinance and enact procedures concerning sensitive information and the enforcement of federal immigration law. Los Angeles residents need greater protection than those being provided by SB 54. No city, agency, department, officer, employee, or agent should request or collect information regarding immigration or place of birth.
Thank you. Caitlin? Caitlin Bellis?
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing us speak. I would like to present to the committee a memo that has been drafted by a broad coalition of organizations outlining our priorities that we think the city should really urgently turn to protect our immigrant communities. I'd like to briefly go over the key recommendations and then submit copies to you all and to the clerk. It's signed by approximately 30 different organizations, members of whom are all present here as well. So our key recommendations are that we should enact a strong sanctuary ordinance protecting the sensitive information of city residents. And also we urge criminal justice reforms, which I've spoken on before, and which we will also detail in greater detail following up with a memo, that you reject funding based on anti-Muslim animus from the Countering Violent Extremism program, and there are other recommendations as well. Anyway.
Milena Jankovic. How do you pronounce your name? Last name?
Last name is Jankovic. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
I thought I would be going a little bit later with the multiple issue comment in 2 minutes. No? I had 2 cards.
You do.
You did? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I am here to voice my concerns about the federal immigration authorities reaching far and wide and kidnapping our community members, deporting people, tearing up communities, tearing up families, and I'm here to ask you today to do something about it. I know there's been a lot of conversation about City of Sanctuary, about LAPD's Special Order 40. I'm here today to ask you to start doing more so people from our communities are not taken away, that these communities and these families are not torn apart. The federal administration has made it pretty clear. They're not making any efforts to make this a secret. This is now open. They want a monochromatic country. This city should stand against it. This city and this city council, this committee in particular, should stand against that. You should raise your voice, and you should say they cannot have it in Los Angeles. This city is so diverse and is so vast. This council, and especially this committee, need to represent that. I ask you to put a stop to LAPD's collaboration with ICE. And I ask you to work on a meaningful, comprehensive, and strong ordinance for Sanctuary City. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we're moving to multiple item comments, 2 minutes per. Dr. Cal Kurtzman. Dr. Cal Kurtzman, People Power Santa Monica. Please join us, Abraham Zavala, LA Street Vendor Campaign. Please join us, Julian Gonzalez, LA Street Vendor Campaign. And please join us, Carla Estrada Sanchez, por favor.
Thank you for
Can
your
you
time.
guys start making your way to form a line, those who I called after you, Mr. Kurtzman? Abraham Zavala, Julian Gonzalez, and Carla Estrada Sanchez. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. As a native of Los Angeles, I want the best for our great city. I think as long as we are not a sanctuary city, that a number of our citizens will be afraid to report crime to the police in fear that their families will be broken up because of information that is shared with ICE. I would like this to be a sanctuary city, and I would like it to be a sanctuary city now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Our intention was to comment item 6, but we were also included, I think, in the general public comment section. With that said, we'll keep it short to respect the time of others. But the LA Street Vendor Campaign is here today to remind the council that there are vendors in several of your districts who are going through an incredibly tough time right now through the enforcement they faced, whether it be through the remaining code that's still criminalizing vendors in parks with 6344 and 8073 in high volume areas of pedestrians like the Staples Center and other areas like that. This definitely is an issue that impacts folks who are undocumented, and we'll make that comment when the time comes. But we are here in solidarity with all the other organizations who are here to uplift the idea of Sanctuary City and the city of Los Angeles. So thank you.
Hi, Hi, good afternoon. My name is Carla Estrada, and I was meant to be on sections 4 and 6, but I am very happy also to take this time to be in support of sanctuary cities. It is about time that Los Angeles takes active resistance against this current administration in terms of sanctuary city, and to support all individuals of the city that are persecuted at this moment from the current administration, and that they deserve to live in a life and in a city where they can thrive and peacefully work. I take this time to urge you to take more action and publicly support. I know Los Angeles is active. However, I feel like there is not enough resistance and publicly supporting undocumented immigrants, but also documented immigrants that are affected by this current administration due to racial profiling and any other contact with ICE and potentially law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Yael Pineda, UCLA Labor Center. Teresa Borden, Maria Sanchez, and Catherine Melendez from Kiwa.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Teresa Borden, and I am here on behalf of CLU, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, as well as I'm a member of Indivisible Highland Park. LA has the power to protect its residents. It must do so urgently and unambiguously. Local participation in immigration enforcement is not required by federal law and is a misuse of local resources. Other communities have enacted laws and policies to ensure local resources are not used for deportations. This provides greater safety and peace for local residents. LA should follow through on the same policy. It's clear what we want. There are people here all gathered in favor of a policy that doesn't collect information, doesn't collaborate with ICE, and doesn't criminalize the poor and immigrant residents of this city. All we're asking is that you please pass an ordinance that is strong and that protects all of our residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yael Pineda. Days before Thanksgiving, my grandma received a letter from ICE asking that she report herself on Tuesday, December 5th at the San Bernardino ICE office for her possible removal from the country. On the morning of December 5th, as my grandmother exited the restroom of the ICE office, she was apprehended and detained by ICE officers denying her attorney's counsel. ICE, who said they would not accept a motion to reopen her case, said she would be removed from the country at 2 p.m. However, by 10:30 a.m., unbeknownst to us, my grandmother was put on a van and taken to Tijuana, Mexico. In 2010, my grandmother became a legal permanent resident and was able to visit her mother after 22 years. In 2011, as she re-entered the country, she was apprehended by CBP and detained for a previous misdemeanor. After serving her sentence, LAPD transferred her to ICE custody, where her residency was revoked and she was placed in deportation proceedings. Had it not been for joint task forces between LAPD and ICE, my grandmother would still be here. The woman who helped raise me and the woman who fed me all the many weeks that my parents attempted to cross the U.S.-Mexico border to reunite with me. I urge the LA City Council to take action, pass these policies, and end LAPD cooperation with ICE and CBP. We cannot allow the Trump administration to continue tearing our mothers away from their families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm here on behalf of Kiwa, the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, and I'm coming from a region of Los Angeles where there's heavy immigration from China, Vietnam, different parts of Latin America, and it's very important to me to recognize that these different groups have long cultural histories in the United States, particularly in Los Angeles. One thing I've heard frequently in the work that I've done is that these same immigrants who see their futures in the United States have also found that the police departments have not provided the support that they've expected for the crimes that they've been victims of. So by being victims of crimes by their employers, by the people that offer them housing, by folks that take advantage of them on the streets, many immigrants that I've spoken to or children of immigrants have told me that they have lost faith in their police force. So I urge you all to consider a more just ordinance so that people who come to the United States don't have to realize that the police force that prides itself in a diverse city is actually not on their side. Thank you.
I'm going to interpret for her in English.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María Sánchez y gracias por dejarme hablar.
Good morning, my name is Maria Sanchez, and thank you for letting me speak today.
Solo quiero hablar para pedir que por favor paren la comunicación de la policía con inmigración porque hace unos meses atrás mi esposo y yo tuvimos una discusión en casa.
So I'm here to ask you to stop the communication between ICE and the LAPD because a few months ago, my husband and I had we had a discussion in our house.
Y los vecinos llamaron a la policía y él se lo llevaron. Al otro día salió por fianza. A las 3 semanas después, no tuvo corte, no tuvo nada. Las 3 semanas después se lo llevaron los de ICE y mi niña está sufriendo y mi niño están sufriendo demasiado porque él era un buen papá, es un buen papá y nunca habíamos tenido una cosa como esa. Solo creíamos que era en la televisión, pero es muy triste.
So my husband was then, so the neighbors then called the police on us, and my husband was taken into custody. He was arrested. He was out in a couple days on bond. He never had a court date. 3 weeks later, ICE came and arrested him and deported him, and it's been really hard for myself and for my children, his daughter, our daughter, our son.
La niña se me enferma demasiado y no sabemos qué solución encontrar para poder estar con él. Y sí me gustaría como tuvieran oportunidad de haber ido a corte y pues no solo haberlo sacado así, sin oportunidad en nada porque es una buena persona.
So my daughter now is suffering a lot, and we don't know how to help her with her depression. I'd like to find a way in which we can solve this. I wish that my husband would have had his time in court because he's a good person and he's a good person and he's a good father.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Abud, Rob Kwan, and I'm say Dr. Ben Stato.
Good morning. My name is David Abud. I'd like to read out a letter from my friend Claudia Rueda that she wrote to the LA City Council. To the esteemed members of the Los Angeles City Council, I cannot be physically present here today because I am taking a final as you all meet. But I want to make sure my voice is included in this conversation. It directly concerns me, my family, and our community. My name is Claudia Rueda. I'm a California State University Los Angeles student, a resident of Boyle Heights, and a graduate of Roosevelt High School. This spring, my mother and I were unjustly arrested by Border Patrol in our neighborhood in Boyle Heights and placed in deportation proceedings after a joint task force raid between Border Patrol and the Sheriff's Department targeted others in my neighborhood. My mom was arrested in our own house. After helping to free my mom, I was arrested one morning as I was moving my car to observe the city's street sweeping schedule. I want to thank the city council members who wrote letters of support on my behalf. Your support was integral in securing my release from immigration jail earlier this year. I also want to thank the Board of Supervisors for recognizing my work to free my mom when they gave me the Yvonne B. Burke Courage Award earlier this year. Now I ask that you further honor my courage and strength by taking action to sever the cooperation between ICE and the LAPD so no one else has to go through what I have gone through. The joint raid between the Sheriff's Department and Customs Protection is hard evidence of the overreach and out-of-control tactics of the Department of Homeland Security. My mom was targeted as a collateral arrest during the joint task force raid. I was targeted weeks later because of my activism to release my mom. Border Patrol tried to criminalize me and my mom, but my community knew better. Neither of us had anything to do with the primary purpose of the joint task force raid. Sadly, retaliatory and indiscriminate collateral arrests are now the norm of ICE and CBP's tactics. These are not normal government agencies and can no longer be trusted. My experience fighting to free my mom, being detained at an immigration prison only miles from the U.S. border, and now having to worry about whether my mom and I am going to be deported are precisely why the city of Los Angeles must take strong actions to sever all ties in cooperation with ICE and CBP. The only way to do this is to pass strong policies that end all forms of collaboration between the City of LA, the LAPD, ICE, and CBP. Thank you so very much for your time, Claudio Rueda. Can I submit this into the council file?
Please.
My name is Rob Kwan, District 1. I want to thank Councilmember Rue for meeting with us recently, meeting with LAPD as well. When we met with him, he had great questions and was really engaged on the issue. That being said, I'm concerned about Agenda Item 4. It kind of feels like the council's putting the cart before the horse when it comes to declaring LA a city of sanctuary. It's been over a year, and we're still waiting for something to come through this committee that substantively separates LAPD from ICE. We need leadership on this issue. With our mayor more concerned about the residents of Iowa and New Hampshire, that burden falls on this council. I'd really encourage you to remember what happened just 2 days after DACA was rescinded. We got wind of Operation Mega, ICE's plan for a massive, record-breaking nationwide immigration raid targeting nearly 10,000 people. I wonder, is this council going to get caught flat-footed and wait until that raid is rescheduled? The data collection that we're concerned about, the information sharing, puts all immigrants under the microscope of the national security state. The Trump administration will try to squeeze every ounce out of this informational sponge they can. Will you still allow LAPD to feed this deportation machine? Will they still obsess about broken windows at the expense of actual broken families? I really do hope that in the ensuing discussion, we hear a whole lot more activity on the issue of Special Order 40 and ICE and LAPD collaboration. At the last committee meeting, the only reason we had any discussion of that matter was due to Councilmember Martinez bringing it up at the very end. So I really do feel that as long as this council is engaged on this issue, working with LAPD, and offers some real tangible recommendations, we're going to come to the best policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben, before you start, Scott Doyle, Andy Waldenegro, and Andy Griggs. Let's go ahead.
I wanted to thank you for hearing our public comments today. My name is Ben. I'm a white man, obviously, and a small business owner in LA. I was born in the United States. I have the luxury of not having to worry about ICE raids. I have the luxury of not having to worry about my parents or brothers or sister or girlfriend being picked up and thrown into a detention prison. I don't, however, have the luxury of passing policies to protect LA's immigrant community. You all wield that immense power. The negative impacts related to allowing officers to ask about LA residents' nation of origin are apparent, and you can determine whether those consequences are illustrative of your ideal LA. The negative impacts related to letting the immigrant community of LA continue to live in fear of a loved one being picked up and deported as a result of ICE and LAPD cooperation are apparent, and you can determine whether those consequences represent your vision of LA. You can decide whether a known xenophobe, Donald Trump, and his administration's Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department can be trusted to collaborate with LAPD. You can decide to be courageous and stand on the right side of history and enact a strong sanctuary city ordinance that disentangles ICE from LAPD. You can decide to protect LA's immigrant community. Your decisions will have deep and lasting repercussions on our community. Please choose wisely.
Good afternoon. I'd like to speak on items 4 and 6. Sanctuary is not symbolic. It is not a gesture. Sanctuary is straightforward, and it is policy. Sanctuary is acknowledging that the majority of those who end up in deportation proceedings end up in that perilous position due to direct or indirect assistance from local law enforcement. Sanctuary is choosing to opt out of aiding and abetting that system. Sanctuary is recognizing that in order to be part of the solution, you must first stop being part of the problem. The City of Los Angeles and its police department have to date chosen to remain part of the problem. The City of Santa Ana chose a different path. Days after the election, about the time this committee was formed, they began debate on a sanctuary ordinance. By the end of December, they had passed a non-binding resolution. On January 17th, 4 days before the inauguration, they passed an unambiguous ordinance whose central passage reads as follows. No entity or personnel shall use city funds, resources, facilities, property, equipment, or personnel to assist in the enforcement of federal immigration law unless such assistance is required by any valid enforceable federal or state law or is contractually obligated. This is not complicated. It is a question of political will. Moving on to item 6, I've come to the conclusion that Special Order 40 is also part of the problem and not part of the solution, or more precisely, the perception, the myth of Special Order 40 as something that gets LAPD out of the business of assisting in federal immigration enforcement. I'm going to submit the first 2 pages of this article. It's an investigative report focusing on one specific raid supposedly targeting human trafficking that netted 0 arrests for human trafficking and put 8 people in deportation proceedings.
Thank you. Andy.
My name is Andy Griggs. I'm the third person you mentioned. I'm from Echo Park. You'll be hearing from me later on item 4 with a CIS from the Echo Park Neighborhood Council. But for these items 2, 3, and 6, I'm speaking as an individual. As a teacher, retired now since 2011, I saw children while I was teaching in Watts and in West LA who were afraid to come to class for fear that they wouldn't go home and find their parents there.
Sir, excuse me, 1 second.
This
you have the 2 minutes to speak on the separate items. So, but we can give you your time back, so you can start over again. But you mentioned separating back
2, 3, and 6, right?
But you also item 4 as well.
Item 4, I'm a neighborhood council, so I have I'm
official statement of the neighborhood
rep.
council. Okay, no, yeah. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I've seen school children afraid to come to school. I've seen their parents afraid to pick them up. It's awful. As a nonprofit advocate for Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace, I visited Adelanto and other immigrant detention centers. It's horrible, it's torture, it's outrageous what goes on there. So for item 2, temporary protected status should be it has to be extended. These are people who have come running away from horrors in their own country. I would like to see that really extended. Item 3. Yesterday, as you may know, 13 DACA recipients began a hunger strike and a caravan to visit California legislators who will be voting on extending DACA before the end of this year. We urge you to support that right away and get on this, because the determination of DACA disproportionately affects LA residents. And finally, on item 6, SB 54 does not go far enough. Basically, I just wanted to add one thing. Hospital workers do not know how to deal with police and ICE who ask for records in violation of HIPAA. People are afraid to seek health care and putting themselves, their family, and their community in danger. Urge you to strengthen and clarify the Order 40. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we hear from Andy Baldenegro? Garrison? You're Andy?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, sorry about that. My name is Andy Baldenegro, and I'm here representing Carecen, the Central American Resource Center, and I'm also representing the TPS National Alliance. We would like to thank you for the efforts for pushing the TPS resolution. However, given the termination for Haiti and Nicaragua, it could only mean that El Salvador and Honduras are next. We would like to work with Council and figure out ways to protect TPS beneficiaries and stop potential deportations. The TPS Alliance has been working hard in Washington, D.C. To educate legislators on what is TPS and pushing for legal permanent residency. The only way to help achieve the safety of Tepecianos is to work together and find solutions. In terms of SB 54, Carecen supports sanctuary cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank all of you. We're now going to move to single item comment on Agenda 1. This is Marin or Maria Flores. ¿Sí? Vámonos. Pasan.
Mr. Chair, are you taking item 1 at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Item 1 is a resolution and a report from the Chief Legislative Analyst regarding supporting SB 30 in the city's 2017-18 federal legislative program.
Yes, we're taking that item on consent.
Oh, okay. But you are taking the speakers, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Hola.
Muy buenas tardes,
Sí,
Mr.
¿cómo está?
Cedillo. Muchas gracias, estoy bien, mi hija está bien y le manda saludos.
Sí, gracias.
Sí. Para mí es un placer esta oportunidad que ustedes me dan ahora. Gracias. Es para mí un placer esta oportunidad que ustedes me dan ahora de poder expresarme acerca de las situaciones que estamos padeciendo nosotros en este país.
So it's a pleasure for me to be able to get the opportunity to express myself about the situation that we are currently suffering in this country.
Porque yo vine en el año 1992 y, perdónenme la expresión, desgraciadamente a nosotros los hondureños nunca nos han favorecido con ninguna ley que sea una residencia o una ciudadanía. Nos han tenido con permiso de trabajo por más de 26 años y creo que...
So I came here in 1992, and I'm sorry about the phrase, but disgracefully, as a Honduran, we have never been beneficiaries of anything that is going to give us a path for legal residency. We've just been kept in this limbo for 25 years.
Nunca se nos ha dado una oportunidad como a algunos países que tienen residencia y tienen ciudadanía. Bueno, una de las razones que yo también llegué al 92 es porque estuve de misionera por 11 años en México y por eso vine así.
So we were never, in Honduras, we were never able to have some kind of benefit so that we can become legal permanent residents. And one of the reasons that I came to this country is because I was a missionary in Mexico.
Y ahora mismo pido a ustedes por favor que nos ayuden porque nosotros estamos sufriendo con esta situación. Yo en lo personal he perdido no sé si 10, 12 libras de preocupación por lo que está pasando, porque yo me veía más joven, ahora me miro más grande y todo. Y luego también quiero decirles que nuestros hijos en este país
So we've been suffering a lot because of this situation. I myself have aged a lot, just you can see in the way that I look, because of the suffering that we've been through. And I myself with my children in this country.
Mi hija, por ejemplo, ha pagado su universidad, siempre paga muchos taxes. Nunca le han dado la oportunidad de regalarle una beca para ir a estudiar. Y como Mr. Cedillo la conoce, es una chica muy inteligente, trabaja para el condado de aquí de Los Ángeles y tiene mucho potencial como joven y ahorita en diciembre ella se va a graduar de la segunda universidad, primero Cal State LA y después Northridge y por eso es que estamos preocupados con el futuro de nuestros hijos.
So my daughter herself has been, she was never able to get any kind of grant when she was going to university, and she's now graduated from her second university. First she was at Cal State LA, and now Cal State Northridge, and that's why we're really concerned about the situation with our children.
Y ella, para poder obtener algunos centavos extras porque no ha podido subir a las posiciones que ella necesita subir, ha tenido que sacar licencias de real estate, ha tenido que sacar licencias de aseguranzas, y entonces con todo eso un poquito ella se paga la universidad y nunca le han dado nada, y es una contribuyente de tantos taxes como tantos jóvenes que tenemos, y pedimos el apoyo de Mr. Cedillo y la policía de Los Ángeles y de todos los condados que apoyen esta necesidad. Nosotros somos los verdaderos americanos. Nuestra raza es América, no los blancos. Discúlpeme si hay blancos, pero así es.
So my daughter has had to hustle for money, and she's had to take out real estate licenses and all other types of licenses, and with that she's been able to pay some of her university fees. And I want to ask you then to support us. I want to ask the City Council, Mr. Cedillo, the LAPD, to support us, knowing that we are the true Americans. We are the original people of the Americas, and our skin color, we are the ones from America, not the white people. Pardon to the white folks that are here.
Termino con decirles de que apoyen por favor los lugares de santuario, porque yo conozco la necesidad de tanta gente que desde el trabajo, de donde sea, la arrestan, deja todo, y la verdad, honestamente, he podido escuchar a ellos cómo sufren, así como nosotros hoy con TPS estamos sufriendo que nos están botando de este país y no sabemos, nuestros países ahorita están violentos. Ustedes conocen las noticias, cómo está Honduras hoy. Así que pedimos al mundo entero, a todas las organizaciones, que por favor verdaderamente trabajen por nosotros. Mr. Cedillo, nosotros hemos visto la labor suya, de que aún la gente sin tener documento, usted le ha dado, usted apoyó para que tuvieran licencia de manejar, y lo agradecemos. Políticos como usted son los que necesitamos siempre.
So I want to ask everyone now to please support sanctuary policies. I know that Mr. Cedillo, you have been a big advocate for us with AB 60 licenses, but we are really suffering in this moment. We're really suffering a lot, especially us TPS holders, that they're trying to throw us out of this country to countries that are violent and that are very dangerous. And the same thing is happening to other immigrants that I've spoken to that are very concerned and are very worried about what's going to happen to them. So we ask for all of your support, please, in passing these sanctuary resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The time is up.
Solamente un punto nada más. Mi esposo se murió y él hasta se cambió su nombre por tal de que no lo deportaran, por tal de todo eso, y se murió aquí. Él es una víctima de lo que ha pasado en este sistema por no tener el apoyo suficiente. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.
So I just want to finish with one thing. My husband died in this country, and because he even changed his name so that he wouldn't be deported, and he is a victim of the kind of policies that have been in place in this country. So I just want to leave you with that, and thank you very much, and we ask for your help. Thanks so much.
Gracias. So that's on consent, that matters dispensed with? Yep. Okay, item number 2.
Item number 2 is a resolution and a report from the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to supporting the extension of the Temporary Protected Status Program.
Okay. Let's hear public comment on 2 before we hear from the staff. Is this Tomas Mejia, SEIU USWW?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, before you begin, for item number 1, that was consent.
Yes.
Thank you.
Emmy from McLean from Endelon, please join us. Chanel Pittman. No, you're item 3. I'm sorry, for item number 2, it's Tomas and Emmy. Please join us. Sí, señor. 2 minutes, please.
Buenas tardes a todas las autoridades de Los Ángeles y todos los que estamos aquí. Mi nombre es Tomás Mejía, vengo de la organización SEIU, USWW.
Good afternoon, council members present. My name is Tomás Mejía. I am a member of SEIU USWW.
Estamos aquí en apoyo de la resolución como salvadoreño a una resolución al programa de TPS y con una salida a una residencia permanente integral.
I am here in support of the TPS resolution and also, working towards a long-term solution, permanent residency for TPS recipients.
Ya como todos sabemos, el Estado de California, y Cedillo lo sabe también, de que el Estado de California representa un gran número de la comunidad que se beneficia debajo de este programa de TPS.
And as some of you might know, Mr. Cedillo is well aware that California is the home for many of the current TPS recipients.
Lo más importante es que nosotros queremos contar con todo el apoyo de las autoridades del Estado de California, de todos los representantes que tenemos en la Casa Blanca, ya que nosotros estamos luchando fuertemente contra esta agenda de Trump, esta agenda racista, dividora de las comunidades. Estamos trabajando fuertemente. Yo fui víctima del racismo que se está viviendo ya en el Estado de California. Yo fui víctima en el condado de Brea, cuando yo me estaba protestando en apoyo al TPS y a los DREAMers. Es importante que nosotros contemos con todas las autoridades, con todo el apoyo de las autoridades de la ciudad de Los Ángeles y de todo el estado, ya que California representa un gran número de comunidad que está bajo del programa del TPS. Gracias, Cedillo.
Eso. And I'm going to try to translate as much as I remember. So it is important for California legislators, both city, county, and state, and those folks that do represent us in Congress to understand the importance of this program and the importance of protecting this program. We need to make sure that we're fighting against this politics of hate and divisiveness that is coming out of the White House. I myself was a victim of a hate crime when we were in Brea a couple weeks back, and we were protesting in protection of TPS and DACA students. And so it's important for us to understand that this is an issue that's important for all of California. We need to make sure the city of Los Angeles helps lead on this issue. Thank you.
Gracias, señor. Gracias y gracias a su sindicato por su apoyo siempre en esta lucha de los años de 94. Ellos son el líder contra el movimiento, contra la Proposición 187. Gracias.
Thank you and good afternoon.
I'm sorry. Thank you and thank your union, who was a champion of immigrant rights, beginning in the efforts to defeat Proposition 187 in 1994. Although not a union of immigrants at that time, they became the champion of immigrants in the efforts to defeat Proposition 187, rather. Proposition 187. Thank you, Emmy. Welcome.
Yo voy a ser muy breve en este punto porque pienso que no puedo decir nada mejor que lo que ha dicho el señor antes de
Qué raro, qué raro.
So I'm not going to say much on this because I don't think I can say much more than what the compañero said before me. TPS residents are at risk today. We've seen that the actions of DHS in cutting or threatening to cut protections for TPS is based on racism and a policy of closed borders at any cost. In Los Angeles, we know the cost. There are many Hondurans, Salvadorans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and many other family members who have had TPS often for many years, who are facing the very real threat that their temporary status will end, and they're in a period of tremendous vulnerability. And as the previous speaker said, we should be at this moment, and this is obviously not your doing, but the doings in Washington, pushing for long-term permanent legal status for people with TPS and not for question of whether short-term status is going to continue, whether it's 6 months or 18 months. So glad to see the city of Los Angeles taking a leadership role in speaking out against the cutting of TPS and hopefully in favor of long-term protected status.
Thank you. Chanel Pittman, please come up. Please join us. Yes, item 3. Chanel Pittman, please join us.
To clarify, just for the staff, that we're going to go through all public comment on all the individual items first, so everyone in the audience will have a chance to speak, so they can get heard before any discussion.
Yes.
Okay, this is a little bit nerve-wracking. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Chanel Pittman. I am a member of the Los Angeles Green Party. DACA. DACA is something that I've seen used pretty much my entire life. I've known in every school I've gone to someone who had DACA protection. I don't believe that it is logical or correct to punish children who had no say in their ability to get here. I've literally lost friends who've been deported as they were seeking medical treatment, having to go back to Mexico randomly in the middle of their time and literally died from the transfer. I'm sorry, I wasn't exactly prepared to speak here, but as the council, you have a right to stand up for people and do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 4, public comment. Let's begin with Alexander Taudos, Caitlin Vallis, Dr. Brian Ellardine, and Louis Watanabe. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking up these important and urgent matters. My name is Alex Taras. I am a family physician. I work in the Magnolia Place Community Initiative, which serves a large catchment area. We have 35,000 children that we serve in our area, many of whom are from immigrant and undocumented families. I'm here because I'm greatly concerned about the impact of arrests and detentions at sites that provide health care that have happened in several states, Texas, Oregon, and I think we don't know, how many of these arrests have happened. And as you know, these actions go against ICE policy, but they still go on. And my patients are aware of these, and they're very afraid. And the item 4 is a great first step, but I urge you to take concrete measures to make sure that all of our community members have access to health care. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin?
Hi. I just wanted to reiterate and finish making the key recommendations in the first part of my comment, including that we also wanted to recommend that the LA Justice Fund be expanded and that the funding be continued. We're really hoping to build a long-term long-term system. As you've heard from all of the comments today, people are really terrified of being arrested and put in removal proceedings, and there's still such a dearth of counsel. And we're really excited about the programs that are going to be starting up, but we need to ensure that everyone has access to an attorney if they are in detention and in removal proceedings. So that is another one of the recommendations that you'll find in the memo. And also, I wanted to again urge the City Council to take strong measures to protect the personal information and public spaces of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Hello, and thank you. Item 4 simply is not enough. People are suffering, and it is shameful to stand by while people are suffering when you can do something. This body can do something to help people in a very practical way right now. It would be shameful to not do something as soon as you see a problem and see a solution. Many people are offering the solution here today. Please, please do something and do it now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Louis Watanabe, and I'm an immigration assistance team member within the Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles. But I'm also here as on a personal basis. So I favor a strong sanctuary city ordinance, and Japanese Americans during World War II, of course, were interned, about over 100,000. And my grandparents didn't have a right to be a citizen because there was Asian exclusion during those times. And I also wanted to point out that my parents were born American citizens, and they were still behind barbed wire. So history repeats itself, and I want it to end. And the city of Los Angeles can be very helpful in trying to deal with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Milena Yankovic. Laboni Hook. Val Carlson. Graciela Lopez Marquez. And Carlos Amador.
Ready?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, you caught me by surprise earlier when you called my name, so I thank the Council for the opportunity to address you again. The federal government's xenophobic rhetoric and policies are already impacting immigrant access to services and willingness of immigrants to engage with the police. Obviously, this makes our cities less safe, and obviously, Los Angeles is not immune to this, on the contrary. We know that this anti-immigrant rhetoric coming from the federal government is already negatively affecting the way the residents of Los Angeles are reporting crimes. We know that that's a fact. On the other hand, studies have shown that sanctuary cities are safer and also experience economic benefits of such safety and stability. You were bold enough to proclaim Los Angeles the city of sanctuary, and I ask you now that you also adopt a comprehensive, strong, and meaningful policy to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Laboni Hawk. I'm a civil rights attorney with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, and I'm here with my colleagues to also strongly request that you pass a very, very strong sanctuary ordinance that protects all of our immigrant communities. And I'm here to specifically ask you in this time of rising Islamophobia to also look after the Muslim American community, which I think is another community that's been very much targeted in this time period. We, together with our colleagues, have presented to you a shadow report for that sanctuary ordinance. We highly encourage you to review the portion about countering violent extremism, which is a federal program that is being carried out right now by the Trump administration that essentially wants communities to implement programs that look at Muslim communities as inherently suspect and inherently subject and needing of heightened emphasis. I believe I have 2 minutes, right? No. But I would again encourage you to look at the CVE piece of the ordinance and make sure to encompass a very broad and very robust sanctuary ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Graciela Lopez. I am an organizer with the California Immigrant Policy Center. I'm here today to urge the committee to place support on the LAPD department, along with Mayor Garcetti, to put forth a policy, an updated special order policy that protects rather than further criminalize the immigrant community. As you all might be aware, Senate Bill 54 was signed earlier by Governor Brown and will be implemented next year. The bill clearly prohibits local law enforcement agencies from asking folks' immigration status. However, Special Order 40 plans to collect folks' country of birth. This will further create confusion in the community and will further harm broken relationships between local police departments and community. We urge that you all support an updated Special Order 40 that protects further than criminalizes immigrants. Thank you.
I'm seeing 1 minute. Is it 1 or 2?
One.
Okay.
Carlos Amador.
Oops.
I'm
Val Carlson
Val.
from the Freedom Socialist Party. Appreciate the fact that your resolution on making Los Angeles a sanctuary city is before you today. That resolution that was presented on September 8th is still in the same form. However, that resolution does not say how this would be accomplished. The 1,200 petition signatures that we presented back on September 8th called on the council to designate all of its buildings and facilities to be safe places where Homeland Security cannot enter. But the implementation certainly needs to be more than having them physically go into buildings. It is very important that the actions of city employees, including the police, don't end up accomplishing the same thing by collecting and giving them information that can be used to end up deporting people and perpetrating all of the crimes against humanity that are coming at us from the federal level. It's important also that employees be trained in how this implementation must take place and have it be made clear that violation of these policies is not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos, before you start, Gabriel Zamora, Elvira Sanchez, Blanca Hirado, and Se Yun Son, and Fall Sok. Please line up.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carlos Amador with the California Immigrant Policy Center. I'm here to speak on the issue specifically on how we want strong protections coming out of the special order on immigration that LAPD is developing. As you know, the federal government has been pushing a strong xenophobic rhetoric as well as policies, and we already know the impact, as we have heard from many of the community members, in the impact that this is having in the immigrant community. We know that the Trump administration is always looking at ways to force or engage local law enforcement into collaborating. And for instance, one of the things that we're asking is for the LAPD to stop asking people when they encounter them in the streets, asking them about their place of birth. We know that this is something that can lead to a deportation. I do have some photocopies of the actual field itinerary that asks specifically about the person's place of birth. That is one of the demands that we would like to see ended as part of the special order on immigration. And if I can hand them to the police officer. Thank you. Thank you.
Gabriel.
Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias a todo el panel por el apoyo a nosotros, a la comunidad inmigrante.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for your support to the immigrant community.
En particular, yo soy recipiente de la licencia. Muchas gracias. Y quiero también vengo aquí para alzar la voz de la comunidad.
specifically, I am a recipient of the driver's licenses awarded in the state, and I am also here to support our community.
So, al levantar la voz de la comunidad, queremos que la alcaldía en la ciudad de Los Ángeles refuerce las leyes que de cierta manera la SB 54 dejó un poco sin fuerza, porque como nosotros los inmigrantes somos la columna vertebral de la economía del Estado.
And we raise our voices to ask that we reinforce those, differences that SB 54 did not go far enough on, and we think the city of LA can do better. Additional to that, we, the immigrants in the city, are the backbone of the city.
So, por eso vengo aquí y a pedirles el total apoyo, como siempre lo hemos tenido de esta administración. Muchas gracias.
And lastly, we are here to ask your support for sanctuary policy, and we've always had your support, so we hope that we continue to do so. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Did we, Elvira, are you? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Soyoon, and I'm an organizer here at Kiwa. I live in Los Angeles. I am also one of the 800,000 DACA recipients in this country. So I've personally benefited from the program because there was a policy put in place so I can come out of the shadows and participate in my community and also be able to directly talk with my representatives. And the same administration obviously rescinded DACA, terminated TPS, and continued to attack the immigrant community. This administration criminalizes the undocumented community and reprimands sanctuary cities when studies have shown crime is lower and the economy is stronger in sanctuary jurisdictions. This is why the Sanctuary Ordinance, Item 4, and LAPD Special Order on Immigration, Item 6, comes hand in hand. Now more than ever, there should be an urgency to put policies and laws in place to protect the rights and dignity of the undocumented community of Los Angeles. So I'm here to plead for your principled leadership, transparency, accountability in protecting those who are vulnerable and continue to be terrorized. Because in our immigrant community, we shouldn't have to live, work, and play in fear. I hope we can make LA a sanctuary city for all. Thank you.
I spoke with you a little while ago. My name is Blanca Malpartida Gerard, and I will not repeat what I said, but I really urge you to look at the sanctuary ordinance for the city of Santa Ana. It does go farther than SB 54 in protecting immigrants, regardless of immigration status. And it does so in a way where you would not be interfering with the role of the federal government in enforcing immigration policies and procedures. Also, it is really important for you to take steps necessary to ensure that the protections given by the state, the county, and hopefully the city of Los Angeles are really implemented. We cannot have policies that are in name only and only symbolic. Thank you.
My name is Paul Sok. I'm with the Youth Justice Coalition. I've been in deportation proceedings for the last 2.5 years, and by far it is one of the worst experiences of my life. It's hard. It's really hard, and I continue to get calls from family members saying, hey, what do I do about my brother? What do I do about my husband? People calling me from detention trying to get advice. How do they get back outside to be with their families? And sometimes I don't have answers because immigration law is so tough. But in terms of sanctuary policies, we need something robust and we need something strong. We don't need another Romulo Velica. We don't need a Maria Rosa here in California, the 10-year-old girl with cerebral palsy in Texas, where CBP was waiting outside of the hospital door, outside of her room. We don't need those things out here in California. We don't need those things here in Los Angeles. And so I just want to urge you all to be courageous and to just do what's right. Just because it's a law doesn't mean it's just. Thank you.
I'm going to translate for her as well. Eso te voy a hacer así cuando que me des tiempo para yo.
Pues ya.
Sí.
Me llamo Elvira Sánchez, soy madre, abuela, de dolor ahorita. Ver a mi amiga sufriendo porque mutilaron su familia, como a tantas ha pasado en estos momentos, hijos sufriendo.
My name is Elvira. I'm here. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I'm here because my daughter's family has been mutilated and has been suffering because of these kind of policies that are ripping families apart.
Vengo a pedirles a ustedes que tienen los medios para poder apoyar y ayudar a estas familias que son separadas injustamente. Comprendo que cuando sean criminales su delito han cometido, pero cuando no.
So I want to be here to ask of you all that have the means to do so to support these families and to support us. I know that when people are criminals, there's one thing, but when they're not.
Ustedes tienen el poder de hacerlo. Sabemos que ustedes son muy fuertes sobre esto y pedimos que sigan ayudando para poder detener estas injustas separaciones que están siendo en cada hogar en estos momentos, a cada instante.
We know that you all have the power to stop this. We know that you have the power to stop these separations and these injustices that are happening at every moment.
Muchas gracias por ponernos en estos momentos para podernos escuchar y sabemos que ustedes son grandes personas y lo van a poder hacer. Confiamos en ustedes.
Thank you so much for having us here. We know that you all are great people and that you will be able to and we hope that you are able to accomplish much. Thank you so much.
Blanca? Did we hear from Blanca? Blanca. Cynthia Valencia, ACLU, SoCal. ME, please join us. Cynthia Anderson, Parker.
Cynthia just stepped out.
Magically returned.
Magic. Two Cynthias. I'd like to speak on 2 and 4, please. Can I have permission to do that?
Not at the same time.
No, I
sure.
won't do it at the same time. So I want to talk to you, please, Gil. We need to challenge LAPD here because the city council, you have the power to stop city personnel from collecting information about place of birth. Anytime someone's booked into custody, they are asked about their place of birth. That information is sent to DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI. You have the power to stop that. Another concern is the City Council should prohibit LAPD from cooperating with ICE by sharing residents' personal information. Meeting with LAPD recently, they've informed us that we're not subject to the PRA, the Public Records Act. When we're asked, we'll just turn it over. You can help us by fashioning a sanctuary ordinance that has the detail that we need in it to protect the immigrant community. And another example, am I allowed to speak more or not?
You can finish your point.
And the final example is...
The final example, yes.
The final example is arrests. Arrests. Right now we have a group of immigrants, mostly undocumented, who drive, let's say, bandit cabs in the city of LA. Well, the city of LA has the authority under the penal code not to book them. They're a misdemeanor. It's a minor misdemeanor. But the city is taking them into custody, and one of the drivers has recently been deported. So you have to stop that, and you can challenge the LAPD, please, for us and the community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Valencia, and I'm with the ACLU of Southern California, and I'm here because we need a meaningful sanctuary policy here in the city of Los Angeles. In the community, people assume Los Angeles is already a sanctuary city. All of us here are constantly telling them that's not the case. Los Angeles is not a sanctuary city. We have Santa Ana that has a great model policy. Santa Ana, which is a fraction of the size of Los Angeles, in the heart of Orange County, where they have to deal with white supremacists every day, and they managed to pass a meaningful sanctuary city policy, and I don't understand why here in Los Angeles we cannot do the same thing. The council members and the mayor say that they support immigrants, but if they actually supported the immigrant community, there would be a meaningful sanctuary policy in place, and that's why we're all here. We want a meaningful policy that actually does make Los Angeles a sanctuary city. Thank you.
Hi, I had also put 4 and 6, so if possible for 2 minutes now, and then you don't have to see me later.
Nope.
Or else I'll divide it up.
No, thank you.
Okay. So more than a year after Xochitl Hernandez requested that the LAPD investigate the wrongdoing in her case, this week the LAPD concluded its investigation, and the results are outrageous. Xochitl has lived in this country for nearly 30 years. She has 5 U.S. citizen children and 6 U.S. citizen grandchildren. She's a domestic violence survivor who's previously gone to the LAPD to seek protection from her abusive husband, but she was arrested and placed in deportation proceedings as a result of an LAPD ICE joint operation gone wrong. LAPD brought 2 ICE officers along for the ride on a local LAPD operation. At the end of the operation, Xochitl had been arrested, transported to the police station, and then placed in an isolated immigration detention center. She was nearly deported. The LAPD concluded this week through its internal processes that their cooperation with ICE during a local law enforcement burglary warrant service operation with no international ties and no formal joint task force was, quote, exonerated, quote, justified, lawful, and proper. The fact that LAPD officers brought Xochitl to a police station, even though she was not under arrest by LAPD and was being transported solely for immigration enforcement purposes, was deemed to be, quote, not misconduct, protected by law or found to be consistent with department policy or procedure. The fact that an LAPD agent testified in Xochitl's immigration hearing and blatantly lied, contributing to a $60,000 bond that she was unable to pay, was deemed non-disciplinary. LAPD has said on numerous occasions that they regret this incident. Nonetheless, their internal review process concludes the opposite, that this is entirely consistent with LAPD policy and practice. According to LAPD, nothing wrong occurred here. This is why, and I conclude, we need a clear ordinance disentangling LAPD from federal immigration enforcement. The risks to our community are too great. Dividing lines are critical. We don't need more immigration agents. There are too many immigration agents terrorizing our communities already. And I'll share with you the letter that we just received from LAPD. And thank you for your patience with the time.
I'm impressed that you have faith that this final change in the law will be something that the LAPD will comply with. I thank you. Mylene Carberry.
Hi, I'm Mylene Carberry, and I'm here with March and Rally LA. Everyone has spoken so beautifully, and the heartfelt stories of individuals who have been directly affected it is heartbreaking, and I just feel that either we're complicit with the Trump regime or we're not. And if we're going to be a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state, that we need to make a fortress. There cannot be, well, we can give up a few and then save a few. We have to put our foot down and have very strong, decisive laws that keep the Trump regime out of pilfering and destroying our community. We're in a scary time where I'm surrounded by people that are asking, when do we move? When is it the right time to move? And I bet you in Germany, when Hitler was taking over, people were asking themselves the same thing. But they left, they stayed thinking it couldn't get that bad. But it is getting that bad. And we need to be on the side of the right and the ethical. All residents deserve to be protected, documented, undocumented citizens, non-citizens, TPS holders, asylum seekers. We must take a stand decisively against the Trump deportation machine. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a 1-minute limit. That's the way this meeting is organized. I would appreciate it, and the panel would appreciate it if those who are calling for compliance would comply. Kerry Kaiser, Shally Adler, Rebecca Sen, and Joey Forsythe.
I'm Carrie. I live in District 4, and about 2 months ago, almost 2 months ago, I called my council member's office, left a voicemail asking what my council member was doing to create ordinances and policies for the city that would totally disentangle our local cops with ICE. I got a call back from a staff person who said that 1979's Special Order 40 already did that. And I obviously disagree, as do a lot of people here. There's plenty more that could be done, a lot of things that have already been said, but I have 30 seconds, so I'll read some of them off. City Council should prohibit city personnel from collecting information about immigration status and place of birth unless required by law. They should prohibit city personnel from cooperating with ICE by sharing residents' personal information. Quality of life and other low-level offenses should be decriminalized, and Los Angeles should not participate in joint task forces. And City Council should bar ICE from entering non-public spaces without a warrant. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Shally Adler, and I'm representing myself. Our city and our mayor need to show courage. It has been disappointing that we are failing to support our people. Persons without whom our city would be much less vibrant and would not be the city that it is today. In many ways, we cannot afford to fail in the forces of Trumpian-made chaos that threaten our life and our democracy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rabia Hassan with Esperanza Community Housing. We're here to say that this city really needs to have some meaningful sanctuary policies now. It's getting way too late, and at Esperanza, we are just wondering why it's been taking the city so long. This current administration has made no secret that it is targeting all the immigrant communities. They've not only rescinded DACA, but they continue to actively pursue a Muslim ban. And they have also announced their intention to withdraw from an international agreement to protect migrants and refugees. As xenophobia grips this country and ensnares our communities, at Esperanza we continue to work with the communities in South LA, and this is what we're seeing. We're seeing an increase in health risks due to anxiety, which brings on increased heart disease, mental health issues, and respiratory distress. We're seeing victims of domestic violence being reluctant to go to the police. It is high time that this city shows that we will stand up to protect our communities. Their voices are being silenced. There's no excuse for your voices to be silent in this. It is high time, again, that we have meaningful sanctuary jurisdiction policies such as those laid out in the memo that has been distributed to you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joey Forsythe. I'm a filmmaker, and I have filmed in many of the undocumented communities in the state of California and locally, and I've seen how the undocumented are really, literally and figuratively, the backbone of this state and this city. And I want to know why it's taking so long to create protections for them. They're a huge part of our state. So I would just like to quote somebody who's much more articulate than I am and say that we are currently confronted with the fierce urgency of now in this unfolding conundrum of life and history, and I would say unfolding horror that we are experiencing right now. There is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. I also stand here as the daughter of Holocaust survivors, and I can tell you that my 97-year-old father, who is not one to jump into any political conversation, has reminded me on several occasions that it all started when Hitler said, "Let's make Germany great again." Think about it. We are facing a really frightening time, and we need to protect those who are vulnerable, and I don't understand why we're not doing it right now. Thank you.
We're going to move to public comment on item number 6. Milena, you want to come back? Did she leave? Milena leave the room?
Sir, the multiple agenda item comment covers all items.
Right, but then... All right. I'm sorry, you already spoke on multiple items. You've exhausted your time. Thank you. Caitlin Ballas, I think you've exhausted your time as well. Laboni, I think you've exhausted your time as well. If you disagree with me, let me know. Michael Kaufman has spoken once.
That was just, I believe that was general public comment. So,
yes, Michael,
yeah.
You want to come on item 6?
Good afternoon, council members. I want to commend the council for its early support of SB 54, which will provide important protections for LA's immigrant community. However, it's important to recognize that SB 54 is a floor and not a ceiling. And the question before the council right now is what more it can do to protect its residents. First, it should cease engaging in the types of destructive joint operations with ICE that we've heard about today that have torn apart families in our community. Second, LA should bar ICE from entering non-public spaces in the city, including its jails, unless they have a warrant, as at least 20 other jurisdictions have done across the country. Third, LA should stop sharing information, sensitive information, with the federal government that leave people vulnerable to deportation. LA and LAPD have been leaders on immigration issues for decades. However, Special Order 40 is outdated and insufficient to meet the challenges under the Trump administration. If LA wants to continue its leadership role in this area, it must pass a strong sanctuary ordinance that completely disentangles itself from the Trump administration and its immigration policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Janice Levine, Gerald Goldstein, Maria Mello. Please join us.
I am speaking on behalf of LA Voice, an interfaith organization made up of 70 congregations throughout Los Angeles, and as a member of ICAR, a Jewish synagogue in mid-city Los Angeles with 600 families. As Jews, it is seared into our collective memory what it feels like to live in fear of a knock on the door, where a small infraction or doing nothing at all can lead to detention, expulsion, or worse. We are exhorted to embrace the stranger, for we know what it is like to be unwelcome and afraid. We also know the terror of what it's like to live in a country that we love and have those we trusted to protect us become the enemy. If the LAPD can terrorize our neighbors by asking place of birth during routine field interviews, if the LAPD can allow ICE into the jails to interview people without a warrant, if ICE can conduct joint task forces with the LAPD and use that information to later go back and conduct an immigration raid, then the LAPD is complicit in ICE's mission of terrifying our immigrant communities. ICE needs the LAPD to be complicit or it won't succeed. Please make sure the LAPD's new Special Order 40 is the strongest possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rabbi Jerry Goldstein. I'm a member of the Leo Beck Temple in Sepulveda Pass. Our synagogue is associated with LA Voice, an organization of over 70 different membership groups, and I speak for LA Voice here today. I speak also for my own congregation, Leo Beck Temple, which was saved from burning yesterday. But the city, in a way, is burning without fires, and we clergy with whom I've been associated really feel it's time to put out the fires of destruction that burn in the inner sense of this city. Yes, it should be a sanctuary city. Our congregation has voted to be a sanctuary congregation. It matters to us. Can I have just 30 seconds yet? I and a group of clergy from different faiths have put together a statement for you today. I'd like to leave it with you. Let me just read the first paragraph of this statement. We call upon the Los Angeles City Council to encourage the LAPD to adopt policy, practices, procedures, and protocols that will protect the dignity and safety of immigrants in Los Angeles. LAPD Special Order 40 does not anymore reflect the values of this great city, and we call for its replacement in a new order that incorporates the language and the spirit of the Mayor's Executive Directive 20 and the vision of the California Values Act, SB 54. We represent diverse faith communities here in Los Angeles, and we implore you, as City Council members, to influence the Los Angeles Police Department to be an exceptional police department, one that represents the values of this city, of Los Angeles, of the place I was born, the place where I was raised, and the place where I live. Thank you very much.
Zach Redmond, Jean-Claude Edelin, Jacob Shepard, Marcela Hernandez, and Napoleon Pempeña.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Mello. I am here on behalf of the Los Angeles LGBT Center. Last Monday, we were proud to host a press conference in support of DACA recipients. And our main message last Monday was that LGBT people are immigrants and immigrants are LGBT people. We are not here in support of immigrants. We are part of that community. As part of that community, we, of course, are happy and recognize that California and Los Angeles have made very important progress in this past year to address a very concerning national situation and anti-immigrant policies that are being implemented. While that is true, and Directive 20 for sure has been an important step, we do believe that it's important to pass a City of Sanctuary ordinance that is comprehensive and that goes into detail in disentangling any possible disentangling law enforcement from ICE operations. And I think I already heard the bell, but that is our message, and thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Zach Redmond. I'm with the Fight for 15. And like everyone else here, I just want to know why you still haven't acted when it comes to passing the Sanctuary City Ordinance. Our city should be leading the way and setting an example. So I'm asking three things. First, that ICE does not share our city's values, so we should not be cooperating with them. Second, that the kind of zero-tolerance policing that leads to people being kicked out of our country for very small offenses should be stopped. It's an injustice so huge that it's hard to even take in. And last, that we stop collecting information about things like where people were born or their immigration status.
Thank you.
No one in our city should have to be afraid to be deported. Thank you.
I'm Jean-Claude Edwina with the Democratic Socialists of America, and Los Angeles should adopt a strong sanctuary policy to protect its immigrant residents, and I mean families and our community. U.S. immigration policy is horrific and immoral, and the city has no obligation to enforce federal immigration policy and, in fact, has a duty to defend its residents from it. In practical terms, this means the city personnel and especially LAPD not collaborating with immigration enforcement, keep ICE out of jails, don't participate in joint task forces or enforce immigration law, don't share information with ICE. Information that could be useful to immigration enforcement should even be collected, such as place of birth. Beyond that, the city needs to decriminalize many lower level or quality of life offenses. Arrests for these non-serious offenses put immigrants on ICE's radar and on track for deportation. The anti-immigrant rhetoric is not only xenophobic, but is also scapegoating immigrants for problems in our society. Blaming immigrants for crimes or loss of jobs and deporting us won't actually solve these problems. A strong sanctuary policy is one that protects all immigrants without exception. Thank you.
Hi, I just want to say, while it's great that the mayor likes to talk about LA being a city of sanctuary, it's quite another thing to have an actual sanctuary policy, which we are still waiting on. And it is a moral imperative that both you as city council members and the mayor need to take on that challenge and be proactive and enact a sanctuary policy that includes ending LAPD's collaboration with ICE, an end to asking for people's place of birth, not participating in joint task forces with ICE. So I urge everyone in a position of power to take on that task with gusto and the urgency it requires. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marcela Hernandez with the Immigrant Youth Coalition. We're an undocumented and LGBTQ-led organization. We have a chapter in San Fernando Valley and here in LA. We work with a lot of youth from Boyle High, South Central, and we've been hosting youth empowerment summits that, this year we had 120 youth come out. And again, a lot of the youth are telling us that there is a lot of criminalization here in our city. So for us, it's really important that this sanctuary ordinance really take a stance against criminalization, because so many youth are already joining the School Not Prisons movement, and we do know that criminalization, jails, and prisons are a pipeline to detention and deportation. So we're here to ask you that you really take a bold stance against collaboration, joint task forces. There was a task force between the Border Patrol and LAPD recently in Boyle Heights, and they took one of our members' mom. Right? It was because of community organizing that we were able to stop her deportation. But they didn't stop there. They came back for one of our members, Claudia Rueda, and not only her, but many other community members. So we are seeing so many communities being split apart. So today we ask you to take a strong stance against collecting information, against joint task forces, and against criminalization of our youth. Thank you.
Hello, City Council. I'm Napoleon Pempena. I'm part of the Immigrant Youth Coalition as well. Our organization at the front lines of fighting mass arrests and detention of hardworking parents, youth, LGBTQ immigrants. As the xenophobic, racist federal administration stepped up its efforts to detain and criminalize immigrants, our communities have had to deal with insurmountable difficulties, all while trying to live decently and while contributing positively to the society. We are here to demand something more concrete than just pseudo-progressive rhetoric. We need LAPD and the City of LA to enshrine an ordinance to protect the rights and welfare of immigrants by prohibiting joint collaboration between LAPD and ICE, and by not collecting immigration status and place of birth unless required by law. The City of LA has a moral responsibility to pass a just and humane policy, as it is in the interest of the vast majority of its constituents. And finally, as a major metropolitan city, LA has a chance to show and influence other cities in the country how a city can genuinely protect immigrants. Thank you.
Daniel Chavez, Carlos Amador, Jason Ma, and Dr. Beth Baker.
Good afternoon. My name is Nina Torres, and I'm from the National Immigration Law Center. The National Immigration Law Center is dedicated to defending and advancing the rights and opportunities of low-income immigrants and their families. Within the current political climate and administration, The immigrant community is directly being attacked. City Council has yet to respond with clear policies to protect the city's residents from aggressive...
Excuse me. What's your name?
Nina Torres?
I don't have a card
did?
for you. Didn't
You
call
did?
you up.
I thought I heard you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, I just want to see where a card is. It just popped up here. And did you submit a card?
I did. I gave it to an officer when I walked in.
Okay. Oh, Nina Torres, National Immigration Law Center. Why don't you start over? There you go.
You could just, if you fill one out afterwards. After
I
you
have
finish
it.
your
I have it.
card.
I
Oh,
got
you
it.
got it. Okay.
We found you.
Would you like me to start over? Then?
Start over if you want.
Good afternoon. My name is Nina Torres, and I'm from the National Immigration Law Center. The National Immigration Law Center is dedicated to defending and advancing the rights and opportunities of low-income immigrants and their families. Within the current political climate and administration, the immigrant community is directly being attacked. City Council has yet to respond with clear policies to protect the city's residents from aggressive immigration enforcement. City Council should urgently pass an ordinance to disentangle Los Angeles from immigration enforcement. Current LAPD policy is inadequate, and SB 54 does not go far enough in enshrining LA's values into law. Without stronger provisions to prevent the LAPD from acting as an arm of the detention and deportation machine, our communities will continue to feel vulnerable and terrorized. Therefore, it is important for LA to be a leader in this fight and help its residents. Thank you.
Jason?
Hi, thanks.
Jason?
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. Yes.
Yes, before you start, let me say to everyone here, I'm happy to sit here all day and listen to you all night long. Until I have to go give away computers. But I'm happy to listen to you. But other members of this committee have to leave. We will lose quorum. If we lose quorum, we will not be able to proceed with the agenda. We will not pass anything that's on the agenda. And then we will have to redo this again. That is a choice that everyone should keep in mind, that they can decide to be on time and speak within the 1 minute and make their point, or they can go beyond that and lose quorum and then have to come back. So please, the committee is concerned that we will not finish our agenda if we do not stay on time. Thank you.
I'll be brief. Thank you for the time. I'm Jason. I'm from District 4. I also want to thank my parents who are here. They immigrated from Korea over 40 years ago, and they've never been to City Hall before, and this is their first visit, and they're here for this. And since today is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, it occurs to me that maybe some of your grandparents fought in the war, and maybe you ask them, what did you do during the war? So try to look forward in the future and think about when your grandkids ask you, what did you do during the dark times when our democracy was facing its most serious threat since World War II? Are you going to tell them you sat back, or are you going to tell them you allowed the city to collaborate with the white supremacist administration, or are you going to tell them you resisted and you helped sabotage the deportation machine? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Daniel Chavez. I'm a coordinator at the Day Labor Center operated by IDEPSCA. First, I want to recognize the Tampa people, the original ones. The rest of us are immigrants and have been forced to come here. I've been working with immigrants, the homeless and unemployed, for about 2 years more. The amount of services available to them are insufficient and decreasing. The amount of reported wage theft cases have spiked. People are feeling attacked and uncertain about their future. We know that the wanted changes to Order 40 will only add to this and will increase the mistrust of the community that they have with law enforcement. So trying to figure out how to criminalize the most vulnerable is not what the mayor and officials should be doing. There's no need to let ICE know when someone's jaywalking or sleeping in the park. So LAPD has no business working with an agency that separates families and deports refugees. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Beth Baker. I'm a professor of anthropology at California State University, Los Angeles. I brought with me a letter I'd like to submit to you, which is signed by Cal State LA faculty and staff. We're urging the council to take strong measures to prevent LAPD from collaborating with ICE, with Border Patrol, from working in joint task force, from inquiring into the immigration status or place of birth of our residents, and from arresting people for minor crimes. We know that already under Trump's administration, deportations have increased 40% over the previous period. We know that the great majority of those arrested have absolutely no criminal record, and that the deportation of people with no criminal record has tripled under President Trump. It's up to us to stop these predatory forces from kidnapping and spiriting away our community members. It's up to the city council to control the LAPD. We also need to control the sheriff. We need to cancel the sheriff's contract for running our jails. Thank you.
That's beyond our scope. Thank you. Carlos Amador, Jose Edward Sanchez, Paul Sok, Cynthia Valencia.
Thank you. I wanted to share also that I was part of the campaign to push SB 54, the California Values Act. And at the beginning of that bill, it was a comprehensive piece of legislation really protecting every immigrant in the state. Obviously, the end result included carve-outs and compromises due to the state of the legislators and how moderate the state legislature is. But I know here in LA, we have a much more progressive voter base. We have a much more progressive city council. And I believe that LA can lead to make sure that we have strong protections and all-inclusive policies, including a sanctuary city ordinance that protects everyone in the city. So I do want to ask everyone who's here in support of a strong city ordinance that disentangles police and ICE, if they can stand up. I know many folks have also come and gone who have spoken here before you, so thank you.
Jose Eduardo Sanchez.
Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for your time. My name is Jose Eduardo Sanchez. I'm a resident of Koreatown and also part of Kiwa, and have the honor of organizing along the amazing immigrant workers of Koreatown. I'm here to talk about concrete, tangible policy change, the type of concrete, tangible policy change that will allow immigrant workers who fought for years to pass a wage of ordinance and create an Office of Wage Standards in the city of Los Angeles to actually file wage claims, cooperate with investigations, and work with the city without fear that the city of Los Angeles and its employees are going to be sharing their personal information with federal immigration agencies, or that they're going to show up to the Office of Wage Standards on Broadway and there will be ICE agents there waiting for them. I'm also here to talk about the concrete, tangible policy changes that will ensure that immigrant families are not handed over to the detention and deportation dragnet just because they ended up in an LA city jail for a minor crime. And lastly, LA could never, ever call itself a sanctuary city if there is no concrete policy changes.
ACLU, Southern California, Joseph Chicas, and Romulo Velica.
I'm Paul Sok. Special Order 40 was written when Jimmy Carter was president. I don't think we have him anymore today. Right? We have a whole different person that's sitting in the White House that has a whole different agenda. And the thing about all that is our families, our friends, our community members, our loved ones are feeling the impact directly here in LA. And even though these decisions are being made far to control the federal government, to push an agenda that makes immigration enforcement rogue and comes into our communities, that brings Border Patrol into inner cities of Los Angeles, we need strong policies. The things that we need to protect us, we're asking for you to do. We're asking for you to be courageous and stand strong for all of us. And so I just want to reiterate that. I've been in proceedings for the last 2.5 years. We don't need any more people to be in proceedings, right? We don't want our neighbors or friends. We don't want our students in proceedings. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Cynthia, I believe you've exhausted your time. Joseph Chicas, please.
I only spoke for 1 minute in the previous item.
But did you speak more than once?
No, I only spoke once for 1 minute at the previous item.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, I'm Cynthia Valencia with the ACLU SoCal. I'm really hoping that we have strong, meaningful policy with the LAPD. LAPD Chief Beck continues to say that he does not want to be part of the deportation machine, but unfortunately here in Los Angeles, most of the time, people who are deported or going under deportation proceedings, it's not because ICE found them, it's because they had some sort of interaction with the LAPD. And we here, we're the ones who are doing the on-the-ground know your rights efforts with our communities. And the LAPD says that they want the immigrant community to feel safe and to trust the LAPD. That is not a message that we can send to the immigrant community because of the fact that LAPD does work with ICE, and so does the LA Sheriff's Department. So until we have some sort of meaningful policy here in the city of Los Angeles that the LAPD will not work with ICE and that any interaction that our community has with the LAPD will turn into some sort of deportation, we will not be sharing that the LAPD is something that immigrant communities can trust. Thank you.
Joseph Chicas y Romulo Avelica.
Hi, good afternoon. I want to first thank the council leadership as well as the coalition members here for their strong commitment on this work. We know it's not easy. We know it takes time. But any serious change that will be long-lasting is going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of thought leadership. That's why I'm here supporting item number 7 on the agenda. As a policy professor from the USC School of Social Work, we go at lengths about analyzing policy and initiatives that are going to make a difference in the lives of everyday people. And today I'm here representing my family as undocumented immigrants from El Salvador, saying that this is an important step. Arming our residents, our citizens, our people with documents and with resources to protect them from deportation or illegal apprehension is absolutely important. So I want to applaud the council for taking this important step and again express my sincere support for this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes, señores del Consejo, señor Cedillo. Gracias. Pues como usted sabe, yo fui objeto de este sistema, policía, migración, y
So good afternoon, council members, Councilmember Cedillo. As you all know, I've been a victim of this system.
Yeah. Por eso quiero pedirle el apoyo a todos ustedes para que otras familias no pasen lo que mi familia pasó. Por este sistema que está separando las familias. Señores concejales, señor Cedillo, muchas gracias por su apoyo y que espero que también apoyemos a toda la gente de la comunidad de Los Ángeles.
So I want to thank you for the support that you all have given other families, and I want to ask you to stop this system, this police and immigration system that is tearing families apart like mine, and that there are no other families like mine that get torn apart by this system.
Para que se haga una ciudad de paz, señor, y para que todos trabajemos juntos. Gracias.
So that this can become a city of peace and that we can all work together. Thank you.
Thank you. That closes public comment. I appreciate all of you. Items 1, 3, and 4 will be taken on consent. And let's move to item number 6.
Excuse me, 1 minute, sir. Yeah, there's a report from a neighborhood council. He has 2 minutes to speak on just the one item on behalf of the neighborhood council under the city's municipal code.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes, sir.
Council, not the greater Echo Park Elysian. Okay. Okay, my name is Andy Griggs, and I represent the Echo Park Neighborhood Council. We passed on November 28th a support statement for Council File 17-1040, and I'll just read parts of it. Because a person is not a piece of paper, Echo Park Neighborhood Council declares its solidarity with and pledges our support to all our neighbors, regardless of immigration status, who contribute every day to the economic well-being of Echo Park and the city of Los Angeles, whose children are our future and whose welfare and safety are our civic responsibility. We, in keeping with our stated values, Echo Park Neighborhood Council supports CF 17-1040 and agrees that LA should proudly declare itself a city of sanctuary, committed to protect the rights of all our residents, regardless of immigration status, and to do so publicly so that those individuals and their families now under siege can take comfort in the knowledge that their neighbors stand behind them in deed and word. We also passed earlier, and it's attached to your CIS, and it was passed out today, a welcoming resolution, which just says basically, we believe that no matter our origin, history, belief, or background, we can work and thrive together because our differences make us stronger. We welcome you as our neighbor and look forward to what we can accomplish together. We hope that this becomes the welcome from all of Los Angeles.
Thank you. I apologize. We had lost quorum for a brief second. We are closing public comment. We have heard your presentation on behalf of the Neighborhood Council. We have items 1, 3, and 4 that will be taken on consent. We are now on item number 6. I'd like to bring the LAPD up to the table. Yes.
Item number 6 is Los Angeles Police Department to report verbally relative to the impact of SB 54 on the city's policies, practices, procedures, and protocols with respect to any contact required or voluntary with federal immigration authorities.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Arif Ali Khan. I am the Director of Constitutional Policing and Policy for the Los Angeles Police Department. Seated with me is Captain 3 Al Labrada, our commanding officer of Hollenbeck Division and one of our leaders who has been handling the outreach with the Latino community and very involved in this issue of immigration. As indicated on the agenda, it's a request for talking about LAPD and the impact on the recently passed California Values Act under SB 54. And on behalf of Chief of Police Charlie Beck and the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department, we appreciate the opportunity to talk about this very important piece of legislation. As you know, the City of Los Angeles has been on the forefront of keeping all members of the community safe from crime, regardless of immigration status or any other demographic factor. This has been in place for many decades, beginning with Special Order 40 in 1979. And the Los Angeles Police Department has always had the objective of keeping the community safe through community partnerships and following the law, whether it's local, state, or federal law, and of course our U.S. constitutional principles. Soon after the election, the Chief of Police made it very clear that the Los Angeles Police Department would not be changing its process, its procedures after the election, that did not change what our approach has been to driving crime down to historic levels, which is about building public trust and working with communities, not alienating them, as a way to build collaboration and make our communities safer. And that the Los Angeles Police officers, the Los Angeles Police Department would not become an arm of civil immigration authorities. And soon after that, when SB 54 was proposed by Senate Pro Tem Kevin De Leon, the Chief of Police endorsed that, as well as the city, as an important way to codify many of the things the Los Angeles Police Department had been doing for decades to build public trust. At the Chief's direction, we worked very closely with Senator De Leon's staff and community advocates in Sacramento on shaping the legislation and to make sure that it reflected a good balance between the need to enforce the law but not alienate the communities that we serve and depend on. The Chief of Police publicly endorsed the bill, and I had the honor of testifying with Senator De Leon in support of the bill before the State Assembly. We believe the bill emphasizes the importance of all communities, legal and the legal separation between civil immigration law and what Los Angeles police officers do, which is enforce criminal laws, and that also recognizes the importance of our partnerships with federal authorities on a variety of other very serious criminal actions that need to be taken to keep Los Angeles safe. Just as a quick overview, I thought I would just go through a few of the provisions in SB 54 and discuss how they affect LAPD's current policies, procedures, and practices. The first and most significant element of SB 54, the California Values Act, is that it prohibits the investigation, interrogation, detention, detection, or arrest of someone for immigration enforcement purposes. That is an expansion of what Los Angeles has had for many years through Special Order 40, which prevents an officer from initiating police action with the objective of discovering a person's immigration status. So this is an expansion in terms of what Special Order 40 literally requires, but it does not reflect anything different from the practice of LAPD officers to not ask for immigration status when they're doing these types of things. The one exception under the law is when it's respect to a federal criminal violation under what is known as Title 8 U.S.C. 1326, which is somebody who was previously deported and was convicted of a felony that's defined under federal law. In those cases, the LAPD still has the authority, as we have today, to take action when appropriate and with the appropriate approvals. The second area is regarding detainers. Detainers are requests by an immigration agent that we hold somebody in custody longer than they would otherwise be able to be held. So, for example, somebody who had been arrested, let's say, for driving under the influence, and ICE would learn that that person is in our custody, and they would send us an immigration detainer request that says, basically, if the person is eligible for bail and could bail out, requesting that we hold that person in custody for up to 48 hours and that they would come and take custody of the person. Back in 2014, the Los Angeles Police Department stopped honoring those detainers based on a court case out of the District of Oregon, federal court case, that said that by holding somebody beyond the time in which we have probable cause to hold them for a criminal violation, that it would be unconstitutional. It could be a civil rights violation. And after that, based on advice we received from the city attorney's office, we no longer honored detainers. SB 54 now codifies that in law about the inability of a local law enforcement agency to use a detainer as a basis to hold them. The third area that it talks about is the release of information to ICE. Now, of course, there is a federal law that prohibits policies or if a city or a department has a policy prohibiting the exchange of citizenship or immigration information to the federal government, that it could put the city in danger of losing certain federal funding and in violation of federal law. However, SB 54 has specific provisions about what information can be released about somebody who's in custody if there's a request. And that's also when we get a notification request, what information we provide, and SB 54 restricts providing home or work address of somebody who's in our custody. On those fronts, we do not release information except that's required by law on people who are in custody, and we do so pursuant to the California Public Records Act with a variety of things that we would provide anyone who would contact the jail to find out if somebody was in custody, and we do not release home or work address information. SB 54 also prohibits an agency from making an arrest based on a civil immigration warrant. We do not do that. We never have, and we certainly will not in the future. If there is a criminal arrest warrant for a federal crime, then an LAPD officer may take some action because it would be a criminal enforcement action. There is also a provision prohibiting any city or law enforcement agency from participating in what's known as the 287G program. This is a program under federal law that enables a local police agency to essentially become deputized to enforce civil immigration violations. This is a program that many sheriff's departments had in jails, which enabled them to screen people who are in custody and put immigration detainers, or it could be for officers out in the field to enforce civil immigration law. The Los Angeles Police Department has never been part of that program and will not be part of that program, and Executive Directive 20 from the mayor's office, from the mayor, prohibits that as well. And then with respect to a lot of the other provisions, there's some provisions that are very specific that deal mostly with the county sheriff's departments because they hold people in custody much longer. It's very rare for us to hold anybody in our custody beyond 48 hours before they've either bailed out or they've been transferred to the custody to appear in court. The last provision I'll mention is that it does indicate some prohibitions on joint task forces that involve federal authorities with immigration powers, and it only allows agencies to participate if the primary purpose of the task force is not immigration and involves violations of state and non-immigration federal offenses. So participation in things like the Joint Terrorism Task Force, Human Trafficking Task Force, narcotics, intellectual property, child exploitation task forces are permitted, provided that is the basis for those task force operations. The LAPD, of course, participates in many, if not all of them, and we do have some additional requirements which are in our memorandum of understanding with the federal agencies. We have specific language indicating that all LAPD task force officers are required to comply with LAPD policies with respect to immigration enforcement, with a specific reference to Special Order 40, and every single officer who is participating in that task force has to sign an acknowledgement form that they understand that they are still bound by the policies and procedures. And finally, the statute requires certain reporting of activities by local agencies to the California Attorney General's Office on task force participation, what types of cases, and oversight mechanisms to ensure that agencies are complying with the law. As I mentioned, SB 54 is not something it's going to shift a lot of the LAPD's current practices, in large part because we have been sort of at the front of the curve here, and we are very appreciative of Senator De Leon and his openness to work with us to ensure that the bill enabled us to continue doing what we know has worked over many decades in building partnerships with the diverse communities that we serve. With that, I'm happy, or Captain Labrada is happy to take any questions you may have.
Are you ready? Anybody questions? Let me ask, thank you for that report, and I want to acknowledge, I saw Senator De Leon last night, the importance and significance of his proposition. I know there are many here who supported his proposition, SB 54, who now feel that we should do more than that, but I don't want to diminish his efforts in creating a statewide law and its impact. Today we've heard that some of these task forces that you indicate that are permissible with respect to having a specific purpose for the task force, that in those instances that there have been persons who have been seized and that they've gone beyond the scope of the task force and have then been placed in deportation. Can you comment on that?
So I can't comment on anything specifically that was the result of a personnel investigation, but what I can perhaps clarify is that there are two different types of...
There were some cases, though, that were spoken today about, and I'm just wondering if you could comment about those, because it seemed that what was represented was that these task forces had a specific purpose, and that then later people who seemed to be in the area were then seized and then placed in deportation proceedings.
There are two different situations. There's one where we're involved with a task force where there are specified federal agencies, agents, and everything is done jointly, and where certain restrictions apply. And in addition, sometimes there's what we would call a joint operation, which is we are executing some warrants, or another agency such as ICE would ask us to assist them in executing a warrant involving a criminal violation. We never participate in immigration enforcement activities with ICE, and we do not do that ourselves. In a particular circumstance, there were ICE agents who were there and ended up arresting somebody on a civil immigration offense. That was not part of the operation, and it was done unbeknownst to many of the LAPD officers who were involved with it. It was not a task force operation, so it was not something that they got together and said as part of a joint case that would happen. When that happened, the department took immediate action to ensure that that doesn't happen, including various levels of approval that have to happen whenever we're doing any joint task force or joint operation with ICE. And in fact, in one particular case, we actually sent a letter to support the person who had been detained to indicate that in arguing for their release. So that is not supposed to happen, and we've taken immediate corrective measures to ensure that it doesn't happen again in the future.
You don't have to go through them today, but I'm asking you if you could give us the corrective measures that were put in place subsequent to this event.
Certainly.
In writing. I trust you have them in writing. Today it's been raised that the mere request of one's place of birth puts an immigrant in jeopardy of deportation. I'm interested in your comment on that. How can we ensure that immigrants who reveal or ask this question, or either not ask this question or not placed in jeopardy of deportation for stating their place of birth?
So that's an issue that we've been exploring on how we could potentially narrow based on our conversations with many of the people in the community. And in particular, when somebody has been stopped but ultimately is not arrested and asking for the place of birth, which goes on our field interrogation or field interview cards. Place of birth, though, is also asked when somebody's arrested, in part to determine whether we need to give them the proper notice of whether, if they are a foreign national and they are not a U.S. citizen, we have obligations under the Vienna Convention and federal law to provide consular notification depending on what country of origin they have or what country of citizenship they have. We then use place of birth as that indication. We do not ask immigration status. We do not ask whether the person has immigration status here in the United States. The purpose of that is to ask whether they have citizenship or nationality in another country so we can provide the consular notification that's required under the law.
You go right ahead.
Okay, just walk me through that one more time. So you stop somebody, and then what happens?
So if we were to stop somebody and arrest them, for example, or actually perhaps Captain Labrada would be better suited to answer
Yes,
and maybe
sir,
walk
Cap.
through the process.
So the question would be, if we stop and detain somebody, we get information, obviously we have probable cause to detain them. Perhaps I'll give you an example. They maybe were involved in a crime. We believe they're involved in a crime. We stop to investigate that. We'll get information. And the field interview card gets information such as name, address, place of location of contact, if there's a vehicle involved, if they're in association with anybody. And that's based on our probable cause of potentially involved in a crime or maybe involved in some other criminal activity. At the back of the F-5, there's a portion of it where we write 6 lines of a MO. What happened? What led us to that investigation? And there's a place of birth. And that information is captured to try to, because on many occasions the individuals we detain on the streets don't have valid ID, and we may have in certain instances names that are very common. So the information, the place of birth, will help us distinguish if that individual is the correct one. But it's not mandated that we provide that. Many occasions the people don't provide us that information if they choose not to, and it's not mandatory. Now, if they're arrested, that information is tracked as the information, as Mr. Alakan stated as well, is that it's information that needed for their consular notifications as they have the right to do. And that's the only sole purpose of providing that information.
So we are required, or it's part of our policy, in the event that there needs to be notice to some foreign government. So that's when we arrest somebody and we give them this document, or...
So what's required under the Vienna Convention, which is a treaty between a number of countries, so that if we're arrested in a foreign country and we indicate that we're U.S. citizens, that they would notify the embassy, we're obligated to do that as well for anybody who we have either detained or arrested for more than 2 hours. The basis for prompting that question will come from the place of birth, to then ask them the necessary questions to make sure that we either provide mandatory notification. Certain countries we must notify, or it's a voluntary notification at the choice of the arrestee. In addition, that place of birth information is used and submitted with the information that we provide the County of Los Angeles, because we're booking them in a system and ultimately they're transferred to the county. sheriff's department or to appear in court. And I believe the information is also put in when we take the person's fingerprints, because every person who's arrested, their fingerprints are taken, and that information is submitted to the FBI.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. So earlier this year, the department indicated that in the Latino community, reporting they were reporting fewer crimes, especially around sexual assault and domestic violence. So how are you going to gain the community's trust, and how are you putting out this information so that the community can trust the department to continue to report these crimes? What are you doing?
I'll defer to Captain LeBron.
So I can use the Hollenbeck area for an example. We did quite a significant. I'm sorry? Hollenbeck, yeah, East LA, a portion of the city. I can use that as an example as a commanding officer there. We did look at that as a reason. Quite realistically, our domestic violence incidents are up in that area, particularly in the Hollenbeck, East LA area, Boyle Heights area. And we did see a reduction over near the Ramona Gardens housing development area. So we partnered with some of the community advocates there to provide outreach efforts to the community, not only to provide advocate information, but also to stress the information of being victims, that information is not going to be shared with immigration services at all. Our intent is to get services to those victims and that they ensure that the prosecution, if necessary, of the violator is going to be followed through and they receive services or shelter. So outreach as well. We've been doing quite a bit of social media outreach in that. But the more importantly, teaming up with the advocates in the community. Those tend to be the best voices for us to be able to provide those forums and discussions and community meetings, but also during parent groups at schools and so forth.
But you heard from members of the audience who say they can't deliver that message to the community. People are still fearful that you're going to turn over information to ICE. So as a department, what are you doing collectively to ensure that these communities can trust the department and be able to report these crimes? That's one indication, that's one example in Hollenbeck, but what are you doing citywide? I'm interested in the Valley numbers. Since your social media outreach, have you seen an increase in these types of crimes?
We would have to get back to you, Councilmember, on the numbers as they are recently.
Because we can say that we are doing the outreach or that we want to partner with the advocates, but if that's not translating to the people who are the actual victims of these crimes, you're not going to get them to report anything.
Yes, and the chief of police, of course, was very concerned about that, and that's why he mentioned it when it first occurred. I know the department has been tracking those numbers. We were prepared to talk about SB 54, but I'm happy to get those numbers to you.
And then the other question, I don't know if you can be honest with me in public or not. Is there a hesitation on behalf of the department to update Special Order 40?
No, we've been looking at. I think the concern is with Special Order 40 is that Special Order 40 only applies to very limited two things. It's that we cannot initiate police action for with the objective of discovering a person's immigration status. Actually, this is alien status on there, and we cannot make arrests based on Title 8 U.S.C. 1325. But that does not embody all of the policies and procedures of the Los Angeles Police Department with respect to detainers, with respect to task force operations, with respect to various other things. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by updating Special Order 40.
I think we're just beating around the bush. Do you think that there is a need to update Special Order 40?
One council member.
That's not on the agenda.
You can answer in relation to the updating of the SB 40 in relation to SB 54. Excuse me, Special Order 40 in relation to SB 54.
So in light of SB 54, because that has been a change in the law, we are of course looking at making sure that we can implement the law. Any special orders from the past are simply things that are changing the manual, and our manual has changed considerably over time. So we are always looking at, as the law changes or as procedures need to change, making those procedural changes. That's not a matter of updating a particular order. That's a matter of updating the manual as we do frequently.
And you're currently doing that? You're currently updating the policies as it pertains to SB 54?
Yes, we'll have to make some adjustments to it based on the things that I mentioned a few minutes ago.
When are you prepared to release those changes or bring them to the council or to this committee?
That's something that's still going on internally, so I don't have a particular time.
Part of that, if Mr. Chair, with all due respect, we should probably have that conversation in committee. can you also, as you're updating policies, also have an honest conversation about how we're going to update Special Order 40?
I'm not sure what you mean by having an honest conversation.
I just want to know. I mean,
the department is always looking at updating
I know it's
its
not on the
policies and
agenda. The
procedures.
city attorney is already making sure I stick to the agenda. Is that what that look is about? That's the look. I will have a conversation with you then after the meeting to
Absolutely.
talk about. We can do both.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
do that.
Let me add the continuing to question you. Quality of life crimes have been raised as a pretext for criminalization of undocs, and that was part of the questions raised today as we talked about 54. I know that this council has spent a significant time ensuring that street vendors are not criminalized, and I know that they're working on some final ordinance that hopefully meets that result. Can you comment on that with respect to what you've seen in the department with respect to people being arrested for jaywalking, being arrested for other quality of life crimes that have led to arrest and detention for deportation?
I don't have any specific numbers, but I do know, based on the council's approval and the implementation of the ACE program, which are administrative citations for many of those crimes, none of those would ever result in an arrest. And I know we've seen, obviously, as part of the implementation, an increase of those. And then, of course, there's been a considerable decriminalization or downgrading of various crimes based on Prop 4757. But I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, in relationship to the vendor issues, there has been several discussions in some parts of the city, particularly the MacArthur Park area, where the concerns have been brought up by the advocates of enforcement. But we looked at that significantly, and I know recently met with the advocates and some of the vendor coalitions, and they've looked at that. And the majority of the actions by the officers have been either ACE citations or warnings. And the warnings seem to be the largest portion of that activity by the officers taking action when they get complaints from either businesses or other restaurants. And warning seems to be the most significant action that the officers have been taking in that area.
Now, none of these policies would prevent you from arresting people for drug trafficking or sex trafficking. Would there be pause or hesitation?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Would there be pause or hesitation in implementing these policies in arresting persons for drug trafficking or sex trafficking?
If I understand your question correctly, would there be pause in doing so?
Right. Do you consider this a bar from you taking those actions?
No. I mean, I think the officers they enforce the law without regard to anything regarding immigration status, et cetera. It's based on whether there's probable cause to make that arrest, and it is something that the department needs to pursue. So I don't think any of the things that we're contemplating or that are existing, SB 54 or any other immigration-related policy issue, is a bar to pursuing criminal charges where appropriate.
Okay. Okay. 1 second, please. Mr. Rue, any questions?
I'm good on this one.
You're good? Is the president good? And he's gone. Price is gone. Okay, we're going to move to item number 5. On this, I thank you for your report. I anticipate I asked you for something in writing, right?
And I asked you to come back with the policy changes.
Hold on.
And I asked for you to come back with the policy changes back to this committee. That was my request.
To come back with
To
policy
come back
changes?
with the policy changes as it pertains to SB 54, as well as an honest conversation about Special Order 40.
We're always willing to have an honest conversation, Councilmember.
So we're going to get a report on the changes on SB 54, and then I asked you for something a little more specific than that. What was it?
The arrest.
You had asked about the procedures we put in place if we have a joint operation with ICE in ensuring that there weren't any collateral arrests, I believe.
Right, where arrests have taken place.
Yes. I'll make sure to do that. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Wu, before you leave, last.
Since you brought up Special Order 40.
Go over your.
I'm sorry? I know, but I'm just saying, do you know when we're going to expect that report? Because I know you're working on it, and I know we spoke about it in my office, and I know you're on your third draft, but do you know approximately when?
What I should indicate is that the department has been working with a variety of people, community advocates, et cetera, looking at where there are things that we may need to improve.
Update.
What method that would be is still under discussion.
Excuse me, Special Order 40 is not on the agenda, but if you can answer the quick question about timing, that's fine.
So currently we're dealing with SB 54, which will become effective in law on January 1st. So the first order of business will be making sure that those directives go forward.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you for
thank you.
Your time with us today.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just for the record, so is this being continued or just a report back, a verbal report back?
Yes, we've got the matter. The answer is yes, as we anticipate their report backs as
Thank you.
Been requested. Can we move to item number 5, please?
Item number 5 is a city attorney report and ordinance relative to adding Article 24 to Chapter 1, Division 10 of the Los Angeles Administrative Code, requiring city contractors to disclose all bids, proposals, and contracts relating to the Trump administration's proposed border wall. This item has also been referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Great. Mr. Suarez, please.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jaime Suarez, Deputy City Attorney from the Office of the City Attorney. As this council requested before you today is a draft ordinance that requires any person bidding on a contract, on a city contract, and those currently under contract with the city to disclose all contracts, bids, and proposals relating to the Trump administration's proposed border wall. Compliance with this disclosure requirement is accomplished by affidavit, where the city contractor will be required to declare under penalty of perjury all of the contracts relating to the border wall. A contractor that fails to disclose on the affidavit their border wall contracts would not be eligible for a city contract. If a contractor declares it has no border wall contract and the city subsequently learns that the contractor does have such contracts, the city could then terminate the contract. For this committee's reference, this is the same procedure that is in place in the slavery disclosure ordinance from which this ordinance is modeled after. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take.
Questions, colleagues? Mr. Rue? No, that's okay. I'll let him know that he's available. Any questions?
I have a question. So do you, is the city aware whether the companies that have begun building prototypes for the wall, if they're currently existing contracts with the city of Los Angeles?
With the city of Los Angeles, I don't know. I don't have that information. I am aware that prototypes have been built already.
I know, but do you know of any of those companies who have begun to build prototypes for the wall? Do you know of any of them have existing contracts with the city of LA?
I don't have that information, no.
Can you get that information to me?
I could ask the Bureau of Contract Administration, see if they would have that information.
Because, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that I had read that as of mid-November, there was at least 6 companies that had already begun building prototypes for the wall.
I believe that's correct. Okay. The federal government sought bids for the prototypes back in March, which is the actual date that I included here for any contracts that were awarded after that date would be subject to this ordinance. So anytime between March and whenever they're presented, they were issuing contracts for the prototypes.
Okay. Well, if you can give me that information, I appreciate it.
I will find out from the Bureau of Contract Administration.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, would you like the Bureau for Contract Administration to report back directly to the committee?
I can just send me an email.
Okay.
Just don't make it complicated.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Rowe? You're welcome. The president speak. Who wants to speak? Mr. President? You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. President, thank you for joining us. We want to amend this to make sure that the definitions of Section 1050.1 C and D should include the following language. This does not apply to companies that have an existing indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract that took effect on or before March 17th, 2017. Okay. Is that it? Move to item 7. Okay, thank you.
So the committee's moving that item as amended by the chair?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Let me take this thing out of the way here, drop it. This thing, can you see? Yes. Yes. There you go.
Holy
Let there
moly.
be light.
He's strong.
Let there be light. Item number 7, please.
Item number 7 is a CLA report relative to establishing a program for the issuance of letters of representation to individuals at risk of deportation and city attorney to report verbally relative to the city's immigrant and civil rights advocates' recommendations on proposed topics for potential litigation. The committee may recess to closed session to confer with its legal counsel regarding initiation of litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D of section 54956.9. 3 cases.
Yes. Mr. Chavez, want to come up to us, please?
Good afternoon. Felipe Chavez with the CLA's office. On November 2nd, this committee gave our office direction to report with options relative to the establishment of a program where a third-party contractor would administer a program to issue letters of representation to individuals who are at risk of deportation. Subsequent to that meeting, our office met with the immigrant advocate and also met with several immigrant rights organizations. And based on input at that time, we developed a few recommendations. I would like to highlight, though, that our office did meet with organizations. In addition to Mr. Shea, the immigrant advocate, we met with the Central American Resource Center, the Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, the American Civil Liberties Union, Public Counsel, National Day Labor Organizing Network, Immigrant Defenders Law Center, Law Office of Yancey, Montes, and other private attorneys. At that time, there were 2 reports that were issued by the immigrant advocate, and both of those reports referenced a proposal where private attorneys would issue letters of representation to individuals who are at risk of deportation. The intent was to somehow diminish the possibility of individuals getting deported. During our meetings with the immigrant advocate organizations, there were several concerns that were raised, and let me just clarify that those were based on those initial reports. Subsequent to that, there was a recommendation with the immigrant advocate where the proposal kind of changed somewhat. So I'd just like to provide the input into the record. Some of the concerns that were raised by the organizations had to do with the proposals at the time did not provide a sufficient definition about what the letter of representation meant and what it actually would provide to the individual receiving the letter. The organizations felt that issuing letters of representation where it would only be limited to the issuance of the letter and no further legal advice would also or could also raise false expectations for the individual. They were also concerned that that at the end of the day, it may not stop the arrest, given that, in their opinion, individuals who retained full-time legal representation were still being deported. And they also raised issues with regard to fraud, data security, and potential liability for the city and for the organization that would be managing and administering this program. More recently, our office had follow-up conversations with the immigrant advocate where he explained that his proposal was shifting, and now he was recommending that in cases where there was an actual arrest by ICE, there would actually be the attorney would actually provide legal representation during bond hearings and deportation hearings. So this aspect is new, and we did not have a chance to vet it or discuss it with immigrant rights organizations. But my understanding was that, in their opinion, they would feel more comfortable if there was somebody at the end of the day where the individual was actually arrested to have somebody to represent them during the process. And that's what we have today. Our report does provide a couple of options for the council to consider. And given that the proposal now includes an option where there would be legal representation at the other end, we are thinking that a possibility may be to explore an amendment to the California Community Foundation LA Justice Fund contract to explore the possibility of having them actually provide that legal representation in addition to implementing the issuance of letters of representation. We could also, if we can make sole source findings, we can also explore the possibility of issuing a sole source contract to an organization that can provide both the administration and management of a program, and they would do the outreach to private attorneys to provide the letters of representation. Another option would be to develop a completely new RFP, issue an RFP, work with the immigrant advocate and organizations, and see who or which organizations would apply to implement this program. All of these options can be explored, and all of these options we can also do as a pilot program. And in exploring a pilot program, we can look at regional options or time-limited options, or limiting it by the number of attorneys, or limiting by the number of program participants. If the council, the committee wishes to give further direction in terms of what you would like us to do or follow, we're here to do that. And we're also here to answer any further questions with regard to this report. I will like to also clarify that in the council file, there's only one written report that's been submitted. The second report that was prepared by Mr. Shea is still a work in progress and has not been finalized. So that's not on the council file at this time.
Colleagues. Go ahead, sir. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, my thought is that we have to look at every approach. And I understand that this is not foolproof or, totally developed yet. And I would hope that those that have concerns would help us come up with a way that this could work. Because I think it has enough merit where the conversation should continue. And I would love to see what cost, in the event that you talk about issuing RFP. I would love to volunteer to be one of the areas if we were going to do a pilot. I think that there are a lot of organizations, Mr. Chair, that I have been working with in the district that I represent that I believe would support this type of a concept, because we have had conversations about that. Right, Brother Chicas? Yes. So I think I would like to at least develop this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
So after talking to the various immigration advocates, were there any suggestions submitted by any of the groups of how we can actually improve or adjust the actual and how this can actually be beneficial to the immigrant community? Did anybody offer any?
Yes,
Okay,
of course.
what are they?
Of course. So they did indicate that they preferred a program where there was actually legal representation provided when there was an arrest. So that was a little different, and that I now believe is also concurs with Mr. Shea's recommendation. They also recommended that the city look into establishing a hotline where individuals could call and either seek referrals or legal advice. And we are actually working to incorporate that into whichever option you seek.
Those are the two.
Yes.
The
other recommendation that was expressed was that they would like to have a forum where them as a community can communicate the priorities of the immigrant community to the immigrant advocate.
Okay. And I had a question for Mr. Shea. If you can please join us at the table. My question to you, sir, is which organizations or private attorneys can you suggest that would actually want to work on the issuance of the letters with the city? Do you have any in mind? Because we've heard from people or organizations who are not necessarily in favor, but are there any organizations out there or private attorneys that would work with us?
I think that what I would like to explore is meeting with, which I can try to do in the next couple of weeks and report back. I'm not sure when you're going to meet next. But I think it would be beneficial. I spoke to Councilman Baru about this about a week or 10 days ago, to meet with the presidents of the key sort of minority bar associations in Los Angeles. And there's an Asian American bar, there's a Korean bar, Mexican American bar, etc. And I think to start a discussion with them, because I think there may be, aside from the potential nonprofit involvement, I think there may be interest by lawyers who do not necessarily work for a nonprofit, but are interested in doing something positive for the community. And the idea was, and again, I need to refine this, but in broad terms, the idea was potentially that we would, let's say, had a lawyer who agreed to sign 1,000 of these things, or 2,000, and the idea was that we, the city, would have a contract with that lawyer or a program the lawyer became part of, and nonprofits could do this as well, whereby if one of the people they had submitted that representation letter to actually later was confronted by an ICE agent and actually presented the letter and still got arrested, there'd be a failure of the program, so to speak. My hope would be most would not get arrested, but some will still, will still get arrested. So the idea would be that if somebody in fact got arrested after presenting the letter, that somehow we would come up with a paradigm under which the city would, in essence, then fund that person's representation first and foremost in a bond hearing. And then perhaps second in a deportation hearing. And let me just add one other thing that I perhaps didn't elaborate on sufficiently when I first made this proposal, but that is that I think that if we pursued this, And let's say whatever, there's an attorney doing 1,000 of these out of your office or your office or your office or out of a church or a union hall. That part of that program should be not just giving the person the letter and not just perhaps committing to represent them in a bond hearing, but should be something that is being done in some areas. I don't think it's being super consistently done here in Los Angeles. And that would be to actually also give the person who you're giving the representation letter to also give them an orientation and to give them instructions on how to gather all the materials that will be needed should they ever get arrested for a bond hearing. Because that kind of material takes 2 or 3 weeks to gather. You want to gather school records, medical records, bank account statements, all the kind of stuff you would show a judge to convince a judge you're not going to run away, that you have ties to the community, a lease agreement, rental agreement, etc. So if part of the program could be an orientation to folks to start gathering that stuff, again, without scaring them and saying, look, this letter of representation will hopefully mean you won't get arrested, but it's not bulletproof, and so just in case you ever get arrested, and have a checklist, say you want to gather as many of these documents as possible and keep them in one place so that should that person get arrested, the lawyer representing them isn't wasting 2 or 3 weeks to gather all those documents and can really just focus on a prompt bond hearing to get them out.
Mm-hmm. I had a question for the city attorney. I don't know if you're prepared to answer this or not, but I know that the report talked about possible fraud with this. And so my question is, what kind of fraud does the city concern with if we implement such a program? And I'm actually very concerned about this part because I've done a lot of work around the notarios, and I've actually pushed the city to do more to protect people from getting scammed. And I would hate for a program such as this to fall into that category.
Sure.
So are there examples that you can talk about?
Is there a specific
as it relates to the issuance of these letters? The report talks about fraudulent activity and people being victims of fraud.
Do you?
I can answer the question. Report.
I can respond to the question. Yes.
I thought it would just be from a legal perspective. What you're.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're not. Okay.
No, which paragraph of the report? I'm sorry. Then I can.
Okay.
I can.
Then we can send it back to you. Then you can answer the question.
Sure. Well, in the conversations that we had with the immigrant rights organizations, they expressed that if within the program, certain attorneys were selected or went through a process where they would be chosen to participate as private attorneys under this program. The concern was that outside of that, other attorneys or other individuals who did not have even the authority or the capability would be issuing those letters without any control. Okay. So that was the main concern.
Yeah. Mr. Shea, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean...
How do we protect folks if we were to do something like this?
I mean, I guess I'm always sensitive to the issue of fraud, as you are, and participated in writing some of the very first state laws when we were all much younger that penalizes notarios for getting involved with immigration work and defrauding people. So I'm very sensitive to that issue. I guess I have two responses to the concern in this case about issuing letters of representation, 2 or 3 points. One is that I don't think we can hold back on doing creative things because somebody down the road may, and if somebody will. I mean, there's no program I'm aware of where somebody didn't try to take advantage of it down the road. So number one, I don't think we can stop ourselves from doing things that are outside the box or creative just because we think down the road somebody's going to take advantage of that. I think active enforcement, I think education of the community that they need to be watching out for that so they're not taken in by that is all important. But if we kind of withdrew into our shells, then we wouldn't call people in for big meetings at the nonprofits and orient them about their rights and give them know your rights cards, because somebody else could do that. Somebody could try to duplicate it. And secondly, in this case, there are, I mean, the idea is that a key part of the program is that there are lawyers who are signing these letters. So it's not like these letters could be issued in the name of a paralegal or of a notario. I mean, the idea of this thing is that a lawyer would do it. And just as lawyers do work-related visas, they do family-based petitions, they do adjustment of status, and they sign those things. And in any one of those circumstances, some notary public, I guess, could go about defrauding people by pretending somebody who works for them is a lawyer when they're not a lawyer. So yeah, it is a serious issue, and we need to be aware of it and sensitive to it and take whatever steps we can to prevent it. But I wouldn't let that alone deep six the idea. And I think, just to go back to your first question, I think there are some groups that have less reservations than other groups about this, and I intend to keep talking to them, meetings that I've had with the LA County Federation of Labor. I was just walking out of a meeting about a month ago when President Wesson was walking in, and they seem to open. There's some community-based groups that are smaller, that haven't got a lion's share of this recent funding, that seem interested, like El Rescate and Hermandad Mexicana Nacional. So, yeah, and most importantly, I think, as I'm trying to expand the concept so that it doesn't just involve a single letter intended to prevent arrest, but in line with the concerns, at least the advocate groups that Felipe and I met with, that we look at it as that sort of the tip of the missile, so to speak, or that's the tip, that's the first step, is you try to avoid people's arrest. But then if somebody does get arrested, we have a commitment to do something about it.
So, thank you, Mr. Shea. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry? Oh, I just wanted to close because I know we need to get going, but I just want to recommend, I think we need to continue to meet with the advocates and work some of these concerns out. But I concur with Mr. Weston. I think that if we can do it at a pilot level, certainly I've offered my district so we can start there or do both Mr. Weston's district and my district. But I would like for us to move in this direction, see if we can't amend the contract with the California Foundation, see if there's any work there to be done. But at a small scale, and perhaps continuing to have the conversation about how we can improve this and perhaps identify some of the pitfalls early on, I would be open to that.
Yes.
So, thank you, Mr. Shea.
I think that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really want to thank the CLA, apologies, CLA for this report. I think it's in the right direction. I have a couple of amendments that I'd like to add on to it, but we did have a great discussion with Mr. Shea regarding the attorney model, and it was just a brief discussion, and it seems like you fleshed it out even more with some additional ideas. But it's basically like a Medicare model, right? 10,000 you have an individual lawyer or an organization will have about 10,000 letters that go out. Not every one of those persons are going to call, but maybe some sort of a fund or some sort of dollar amount per case or something like that. I mean, those were all just ideas that we were just generally speaking, and I think that's in the right direction. I don't know what's going to work, but I look forward to the final product. And at the same time, I mean, I concur with my colleagues about the pilot project. But at the same time, and I guess pilot project would be option D?
Yes, but option D can be along with any of your other
So can
options.
we could pursue with option
Yes.
A and D, and that's what Councilman Martinez was also talking about, because I think option D might be done faster, but option A, I don't want to. I would like for us to pursue both option A and D. But on top of that, I also asked for a report back on possibly using, and I think what Councilman Martinez was asking about, the advocate community asked for a hotline number and legal representation when arrested, but I also asked about possibly using this for bail, for either, whether it's be the TPS clients or whether it be the Dreamers, because that's happening now. I mean, for our TPS individuals, the temporary protected status could be canceled at any time. So I wanted to especially see if the Justice Fund or have a protocol and set, see how we could use bail monies or use it for bail monies or any other aspects. So I would love it if you could expand on not just the letter program with representation, and maybe the bail and everything else could be other components, but is that something you guys were thinking
Yes,
of?
I mean, we can certainly review the contract with the LA Justice Fund and see if any of that's already addressed there.
Right.
And certainly explore additional options or possibilities under this new proposal.
Great. So with the legal representation and bail, but also separately, if we could just because I'm afraid it might take some time to flush this idea out. So, but if people start getting arrested,
Councilmember Rue, the current contract with the California Community Foundation allows for today legal service to be provided for. It actually prioritizes under the contract that the council approved legal representation for DACA members and for other members that are prioritized according to those criteria that were set up by the council. And so I think the only thing that would be missing from the existing contract is a prioritization for TPS.
Okay.
But DACA is already there.
So if we could add TPS, and so now it's just for us coming up with the actual process.
Yes.
On how that's done. Okay. Well, yeah, and same things in lines with what Councilmember Martinez was talking about. I mean, if we could add to the recommendation that the CLA, City Attorney, and Immigrant Advocate report back on the feasibility of amending the CCF contract to include the representation part, as well as recommendation on what types of programs would be most accessible and helpful for the community. So, which is again same line what we're discussing. So,
can you repeat that one more time?
Asking the various departments involved to report back on amending the CCF contract to include a representation program, which is what we're working on, as well as the second part is recommendation on what types of programs would be most accessible and helpful for the community. So if the advocates ask for a hotline number, it seems like you're already willing to include it, but if we could explicitly have that in the next version or the final report of the different aspects. And it could be included or it could be a whole separate program.
Right.
Yes, we can do that.
If I could mention one other item that's related to this, but was really an earlier item on the agenda, but I do think it's related to this, and that is that all of these programs, even when you're doing something like an outreach program for to try to prevent arrests in the first place, especially if the city is going to play a prominent role, they are based in enormous part on the trust that community has with the city, and I think that goes kind of with without saying. In other words, you heard a lot of the testimony from the public today. So if we said we're going to have this kind of a program to provide representation letters and representation, and you have to go down to LAPD to sign up, the number of people signing up would be very low. If we said you're going to go to Councilmember Martinez's office or Rue's office or Cedillo, the number would go up. Why? Because there's a trust factor. So I know it's not at this point of the agenda, but there is a linkage to what you were discussing earlier and what you heard from probably 80% of the people who testified today, which is their sense that it's time for the city to come up with its own ordinance. And so I've prepared something for your consideration. Maybe it's something we can take up more at the next meeting, because was submitted
Yes,
to you recently.
exactly. Let's do one at a time.
Right.
And let's make it more exact, less vague.
Yeah.
Let's make it more, I know I'm interrupting you, more adequate. Let's make it more exact. We can't stop arrests. Let's be clear about that.
Right.
So the lament that something doesn't stop an arrest is insufficient in itself for us not to go forward. But let me note that there are organizations, like you said, or institutions or people who immigrants do have trust in. I don't doubt that we would, once upon announcing this, get a sufficient amount of people interested in this. But there's also groups like you mentioned, Hermandad Mexicana, LA Voices here. They've got a long and rich history of membership. And there are many groups that have membership, immigrant membership,
Right.
whether it's the AFL-CIO, and there are various locals who have deep participation, Local 11 HERE or Justice for Janitors, various locals who have that type of participation. Obviously, a whole range of church groups who are organized in various coalitions. Employers also, whether it's the garment industry or the hotel industry, have an interest in stabilizing the workforce, have an interest in not having their members deported, and so we should look at that. And of course, the Los Angeles Unified School District has an extraordinary interest in having their parents of their students not being deported, and so we should look at both LAUSD and the growing community of charter schools are areas where there is various degrees of trust. Let me commend you for coming forth with this idea. It is radical in the sense that it thinks of immigrants not as clients or as victims, but as people who can be empowered with tools for their own to defend themselves once they have those tools. We should think beyond the Your Rights card to apps, electronic media, technology, so that we can use that to empower immigrants who can then defend themselves, working in collaboration with institutions, lawyers, organizations, etc. Colleagues, I'm prepared to move this matter forward. I think Mr. Rue, you wanted option A. I'm satisfied with option D. A and D are fine for me. At this moment, this is obviously a work in progress, so we can only be as specific as we can be right now because this is obviously, as we would say,
and with the
not-
various
not
amendments
cooked
about asking for an expansion of other options.
Yes.
Like the hotline.
Yeah, like the hotline.
Well, of course, the hotline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember?
Yes.
It's just to Councilmember Martinez's question. I don't know if you want to include it this time, but to your fraud question, any program that's created, you may want to introduce a ordinance that actually criminalizes either the sale or the misrepresentation of the letters.
We'll take that into
But you can
consideration.
take-
Great idea.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Draft it.
We'll look at a proposal on it. Yeah, so we want to move item 7.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question just for clarification. In adopting option D, it does give you basically an opportunity to provide staff with what type of pilot program you're looking for. If you want to concentrate it geographically, do you want it limited to a certain area?
Well, we're limited and organized by geographic areas, so I know that the council president is interested in doing this. CD1, of course, is prepared to move forward and work on this. I know that Councilmember Martinez, the Valley, has a particular role to play in this, and so those 3 districts are committed to it. I don't know if you want to join the chorus here.
I mean, I'll leave it up to Peter Shea and the CLA. I mean, I don't mind if CD4 is included, but since it's a pilot, I want it to be the money to be focused.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
Okay.
But I'm
So
open.
you've got three districts that want to work on a pilot so that we can look at how this plays out.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So you're moving this to council with the recommendations from the CLA report, options A and D, with Councilmember Rue's amendments?
Correct.
Thank you.
And also recommendations 2 and 3 in the CLA report.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, okay, so that is moved, all of us, and right before you leave, don't leave, we're going to close this meeting right now.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
we have not taken item 2 yet.
No.
He's going to do that now.
I'm suggesting we
sorry.
take item 2 now. I think that's a consent item. Am I correct? Yes. We're going to move and protect, do all our advocacy on TPS, and go forward with that.
On consent.
On consent. Okay.
And then
without objection?
One more. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, one more.
One more clarification.
Yes.
For item number 5, that you were moving that to council with the city requesting the city attorney to amend the ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
You have it right. Okay, so we are moving this matter without objection. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.